Welcome to At the Ready Podcast, where we gear up men to navigate life's battles with purpose. Join us as we arm ourselves with wisdom, faith, and a community of men prepared to walk this life together. Now let's get ready. On this episode of At the Ready, I sat down with my local fire chief, Jeremy Creason. I've known Jeremy for 20 years. I introduced him to his wife, somebody that I was close to back in my earlier teenage years, and then over time we grew apart. And in that time, he started and worked for and now is the chief of the fire department in my local community. He's a great guy, a man of faith, a man on a similar walk as me that we discovered as we had this interview. We talked about a lot of great things. We talked about being a first responder, what that looked like. We talked about being a man of faith. We talked about walking in God's calling. We talked about a local tornado. We talked pretty heavily about that local tornado that we had here almost 3 years ago in my community, and some of the things that we both experienced because we were involved in that. And then we also talked about rebuilding our town and what does that look like now, and the bureaucracy behind it, and how it can be a slow process, and the frustrations and all those things. We talked about a lot of great stuff. So pull up a chair, put in an earbud, listen up. This is a good one. This one's fire. No pun intended, right? A great time talking to my friend Jeremy. Now let's get ready. All right, Jeremy Creason, welcome to At the Ready Podcast.
I was glad to be here, Brad.
Man, we have known each other. We go way back.
About 20 years?
About 20 years. I'm 38, well, maybe a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Because I worked for you at RC Cola when I was in high school, and I'm 38. So
yeah, so that was my first real job. I guess as the warehouse manager at the RC Cola plant, and and you were one of my warehouse guys that loaded drinks on trucks.
Listen, man, you had your hands full with that group.
I did.
Guys.
I did.
Some of us. And if you're watching this and you were part of that crew, you know who I'm talking about. Some of us were really good workers and did good, and then some of us were little hellions and probably goofed off more than we worked. And
it was good motivation for me to find something,
find another job.
Find another career path. Yeah,
that's funny, man. I appreciate you coming, Jeremy. You're a busy guy. You are a man in our community, like a leader, a pillar of our community. That's why I wanted to have you on, so I appreciate you being a part of the show. I'm going to give you a little bit of an intro, just so if people don't know who you are. If people from Mayfield watching this, I would hope they would know who you are, but they may not.
Well, it's okay.
It's okay if they don't?
It's okay.
All right. So you are currently the fire chief and EMS director for the city of Mayfield.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So some history. You started at Mayfield Fire Department in October 2008.
Yep.
You finished paramedic school in 2011. You were a training officer there from 2012 to 14. Then you were promoted to the assistant chief.
Yes.
From 14 to 16. And then you've been the fire chief since 2016 till now.
That's it.
2020, you were Kentucky League of Cities Municipal Employee of the Year. That sounds really good and official. 2020 and 2021, you were a Citizen of the Year nominee. 2022, you won Mayfield Graves County Chamber of Commerce Citizen of the Year.
Yes, sir. Man,
you've accomplished quite a bit.
Well, we've had a lot going on, and I'm always very appreciative of of recognition. But in my position, a lot of times I feel like I get recognition for the things that my employees do.
Your people do.
And so I'm always honored, but, in the end, I feel like the Lord's blessed me to be in a position to where I get to oversee a lot of guys and women that they do really important work in the community.
Yeah.
And so my main job is to give them the tools they need to help the people in our community.
Yeah. Very good. All right, so let's hear your story, Jeremy. I know you're a man of faith,
Yes.
which is also one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the podcast. We'll talk about some of that too, but I don't know, where do you want to start telling us about yourself?
Well, just my testimony is it's a lot like a lot of other people's. I grew up in church.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say if you did an audit of every Sunday that I've been alive, probably 95% of them I've been in church.
Mm-hmm.
I was I grew up in an environment where I attended church every Sunday night, every Wednesday night, active in youth, but I never remember a time when I wasn't a believer,
Mm-hmm.
but I haven't always been a follower of Christ.
Got you.
And so as I got into adulthood, I started questioning my faith, and I got married, and as we were having children, just working through some faith questions with my wife, and looking at where we needed to be, where we wanted our church family to be. Kelly and I, we wound up at Sedalia Baptist Church, and I'll just say I started hearing the word preached in a way that I had never heard before,
Mm-hmm.
And it, the Holy Spirit spoke to me, and I realized that it was time for me to become a follower of Christ. And again, there's never been a time when I haven't believed.
Mm-hmm.
I've always believed in God. I've always believed in Jesus Christ. I've always believed in His death, burial, and resurrection. But I was never a follower. And so it's been 10, 11 years ago that change occurred in me, and so I put my faith in Christ. I was baptized, and we teach justification, sanctification, and glorification.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point in my life, I truly felt justified. And of course, everybody's sanctification path is a little bit different.
Right.
And so that's kind of the path I'm on right now, and just working towards glorification someday.
Yeah. So I got to get you at some point. I got to get you one of my T-shirts.
Okay.
It says sanctification, and you know how like on the definition, how it's all spelled out, and then so it says that it's written on there like that. It's just a black T-shirt. It says sanctification, but the definition for it is suck a little bit less every day.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it's got my logo on the back, so we'll get you one of those.
I need that.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Yeah. Awesome. So you started out Sedalia with you and your wife as a family?
Yes.
Let's back up a little bit. Your wife, I'm going to take credit for you and your wife being together.
You did introduce us.
I did introduce
a long
you to
time
your
ago.
wife.
Yeah.
Back when I was one of those little
Yeah.
you know what's working for you,
Yeah.
I introduced you to your wife. So
Yeah.
you're welcome.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. It's worked out well for me.
No, I was friends with your wife before you got together. Super awesome woman now. I mean, I call her a girl then because we were around the same age. But
Yeah.
super amazing woman.
She
what I
is.
know her.
She is a rock for me.
Mm-hmm.
Through good times and bad, we joke around. And, I'll tell her, you can leave me if you want, but I'm coming with you. That's kind of how we look at things.
Yeah.
And but just through the last several years, she's in some of the hardest professional times of my life. It's been great to have a family to come home to that I know
Yeah.
is praying for me. That's trying to ease some of that burden when I come home from a long day or a rough day. So I thank God for her every day.
Yeah. So talk to me about let's look at your professional career, and if you're like me, your faith is involved in all of it. But what made you want to be a first responder, or when did you get to that point? Like, I'm going to be a fireman.
So honestly, I after I left RC, I was, of course, I had a CDL.
Mm-hmm.
I was working for a company out of Paducah called U.S. Foods, delivering supplies to restaurants,
Yeah.
and I was working, making pretty good money. We had Avery, my oldest daughter. She had just been born, and something happened in the economy. Diesel prices shot up real high, and I was low enough on the seniority list that when they had to lay off drivers to cut costs,
Gotcha.
I was one of the 5 that they laid off.
Yeah, you were on the chopping block.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here I am. I'm 27 years old, I guess. I've got a wife and a brand new baby and a house payment and car payments,
Mm-hmm.
and I needed a job. And so we came home, immediately started looking. And Kelly, again, she encouraged me to do something different. Let's find something that you can be passionate about,
Mm-hmm.
that you want to do. And so I was sitting at home one day, and I had Avery at home with me. She was a baby, and I was looking through classified ads, and I saw that the city of Mayfield had a vacant position for in the fire department.
Mm-hmm.
And my cousin Dale Usher, he at the time he was still working there, and he was probably 15 years in on his career.
Yeah.
I had always known that Dale worked there, and he was he always spoke highly of it. So I just called him and I said, "Hey, tell me about the fire department. What does it consist of? Tell me about the job."
Mm-hmm.
And after talking to him about it a little bit, I talked to Kelly about it, and I said, I feel like this is something that I can make a career out of, where I enjoy going to work every day.
Right.
And so I applied and went through the interview process. Of course, there was a fitness test I had to take, and a written test, aptitude test. And then we got through the interview process, and I was just sitting at home waiting, and I got a call, said, "Hey, are you still interested?" And I said, "Absolutely." And they said, "Well, we'd like to offer you a job."
Mm-hmm.
And so I got off the phone, told Kelly, I was like, "Well, I'm a fireman,"
Yeah.
and that's just kind of how it started.
Yeah.
And so then you go through, you work 24-hour shifts and you're off 48.
Mm-hmm.
So there was that adjustment to another new schedule, and
Right.
so, but that's really how it started. It wasn't. If you would have asked me when I was 19 years old,
Yeah.
if I would be sitting right here right now having this conversation about career paths, and as the fire chief of the city of Mayfield, I'd probably tell you you're crazy.
You're crazy. That's
But
not me. Yeah.
but the Lord has a path for all of us.
That's
and
right.
Here I am.
Yeah. So I did that work for a little while, and it was something that I was passionate about. Unfortunately, it didn't pay a lot the way I tried to do it. So I went, got my EMT certification, and I worked for Mercy
Okay.
in Paducah for maybe about a year,
Right.
just part-time. The reason I decided to get into that is a whole nother story. Really long story short, I was at a softball tournament, and a man killed over dead right on the field.
Yeah.
And I worked on him just because through my military I had some, combat lifesaver experience.
Right.
But then, he ended up dying, not because of anything we did wrong, but, he just had a heart attack and died. But me and a volunteer fireman worked on him. And then after that was over, even though I was the guy that stepped up, I thought to myself, like, I'm woefully unprepared if something like that was to happen again. I was like, that won't happen to me again.
Right.
Like, that's the personality I have. I'm like,
Right.
that won't happen to me again. And the next month, I signed up for EMT school. My wife's like, what are you going to do with that? I was like, well, I'll be prepared.
I'll be prepared.
And maybe I'll do some part-time work.
Right.
You know. And then wasn't long, I got hired onto a chemical plant, and I tasted real money, and I was like, yeah, this ain't working for
Yeah,
me.
yeah. That's you can be on the ERT team at the chemical
That's
plant.
right. Yeah. So, but it is a very fulfilling job, and I kind of wish, hindsight, I'm invested where I'm at now, but I wish I was more in your shoes now, to where I'd had a job where I could get up every day and be like, I get to go to work today.
Right.
Not that I hate where I work. Don't get me wrong. It's a good company. I like the guys I work with, but I don't ever wake up and go, woohoo, I get to go work on some chemical pumps today.
Right. Well, it's obviously there's good days and bad
Right.
in what we do. And I feel like the city of Mayfield, we're a little unique in that we do fire and EMS.
Yeah.
So, like you mentioned, you worked at Mercy part-time. You've got the Paducah Fire Department. You've got Mercy EMS. And same in the city of Murray. They're split. And so with the Mayfield Fire Department, one of the things that I really like is EMS can get a little monotonous after a while. And so you'll get a fire that kind of gets that adrenaline rush, and you get to go pack up, and you're going in 1,000-degree house, and you're doing your thing there.
Right.
And then I've always really enjoyed vehicle extrication. The jaws of life. That was something that I was for whatever reason, I was naturally pretty good at it.
Yeah. I remember they ran us through that training for EMT school. They let us. It was just like a day, like an 8 hours.
Just to get acclimated to the tools.
And that was fun. I remember.
Yeah. Oh, cutting the car up is. I still. That's one of my favorite things to do. And so you kind of have the best of both worlds. Working fire only, fire departments really don't make a lot of responses.
Yeah.
Just fire prevention and fire code and building code has really done a good job in reducing the number of fires you have.
Yeah.
So what we do is a really good mix. But I tell people all the time, you'll have more impact on somebody's life in the back of an ambulance than you ever will on a fire truck. You'll have opportunities every day to comfort somebody.
Yeah.
You'll have opportunities every day to do things that can mean life or death.
Right.
And so those skills and that training, if you really want to help somebody when they need it, you're going to get way more chances to do that in the back of an ambulance than you ever will in a fire truck.
Yeah, there's a lot of time, just from the year that I worked there's a lot of time. So I was at EMTB. A lot of times they would stick us on the nursing home runs. Mercy would do those. I don't know if y'all do those here. You take them to the hospitals and whatnot. Yeah, so a lot of times I got stuck on those. But, man, I've had some of the best conversations with an elderly saint, or senior saint, in the back of a ambulance just riding from nursing home to hospital,
So most of the time when we hire somebody new, I'll tell them you treat everybody in the back of an ambulance like it's your grandmother. And if you and your grandmother don't get along, you treat them like it's my grandmother.
Yeah, right.
And she's going to tell me how it went.
Right.
Because that's a lot of what you do. If you show compassion to somebody, they're not going to call me and complain that it took you 3 tries to get an IV started.
Right. Yeah.
But if you're a jerk or rude, or you're going into it with a bad attitude, you can not fluff their pillow and they're going to call me and complain. And so just showing that compassion and that care for somebody when they're going through a rough time, that says a lot about just the character of a person. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I really try to press on everybody that works for us.
Yeah. So you excelled in the fire department. I'm going to really quickly, I think, from where you started to where you are now. So you hired on in 2008, and by 2016, you're the chief. 8 years, you went from new hire to chief.
It was very quick.
It was super quick. I remember, just as a person that knows you, I remember when you got the chief, and I was like, he ain't been working there that long. In my mind, that's a job that you need to be there 10, 15 years, and then you get to be chief.
I felt the same way.
So I guess my question is, did you just excel that well? Did some people retire at good times, or a mixture of both, or what?
So it was kind of a mix of both of what you said.
Yeah.
Of course, I started in 2008, went through EMT school, got through all my firefighter certifications. The first time an opportunity came open, I enrolled in a paramedic program.
Mm-hmm.
That's a 2-year program.
Right.
I completed that around 2011, and I was loving my job. I was content. But at the time, our training officer. So there are 3 administrative positions in our department. There's the chief, an assistant chief, and then the training officer for the department. He was interested in coming out of the administrative side and going back into shift work.
Okay.
In order to do that, the chief at the time, I guess, told him he had to have a worthy replacement for himself.
Gotcha.
So he came to me one day and he was like, "Hey, have you ever considered training office?" And I said, "Well, that's you."
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, I'm trying to get back on shift, and I was wondering if maybe you'd be interested." So I went and talked to him about it and looked at the schedule. I would be coming off of the 24-hour schedule, back onto 5/8 Monday through
better
Friday.
For home life. Yeah.
With 2 young kids at the time, and of course Kelly is a nurse, so she's working 12-hour shifts, and I was like, well, maybe I can do this, and you make sure everybody maintains their credentials and their certifications. You do weekly training for each shift, and then you just spend time researching and the needs of the department, and just you're really just kind of getting your feet wet in fire department administration.
Yeah. Well, and two, before you move on, the medicine and how we treat, treating traumas, it's constantly changing.
Absolutely.
So it's really good for departments to have that position. So, hey, boys, you know how we used to do it this way? They've figured out that's not the best way anymore. Now we do it like this.
Right. So, every couple of years, American Heart changes up CPR guidelines.
Yeah.
Or, like you said, our state medical protocols are always changing medications or the proper dosage or, certain procedures. And so it was a lot of fun for me personally to stay up on those things. And So I'm just plugging along doing that job for 2 years. I really didn't have anything on my horizons. I was just doing that job and enjoying it. And so that was 12 and 13. And at around the end of 2013, the chief announced that he was retiring. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, the assistant chief at the time said, "Well, if he's leaving, I am too." So there were 3 administrative positions.
Yeah,
2 of them were retiring.
We're out. Yeah.
And so here I am with less than 5 years on the department, and I'm the only person on the department that really has any administrative experience.
Right. And
so I knew for a fact that I would not submit an application to be the chief at that time. Mm-hmm. So I just sat back, and the Randy Henson, who was he was actually my assistant chief on shift. He was my supervisor. He was named chief of the department, and he came back to me one day and he said, "I want you to be my assistant chief." And he said, I told him, when I took this job that I wanted you at my side.
Right.
And so, of course, I had to go through an interview process and get approved by the mayor and council, but then I was named assistant chief. I did that for 2 years. So at that point, I learned about EMS billing, and I learned how to write grants, and it's just a progression,
Mm-hmm.
And it was a lot. There was a lot, I guess, steeper learning curve Chief Henson had never worked administration. He was just one of the senior guys on the department. He was a strong leader.
Yeah.
He was a tactics operations guy.
Right.
And so I spent a lot of time with him. We learned a lot of things together.
Gotcha.
And so when he was working through issues as the chief, typically I was in the room with him. We were working on budgets together and how to go about, just different things in the department. So then he already had enough time to retire when he took that job.
Yeah.
And so he did it for a couple years, and then he comes to my office one day and he said, "I'm out. I've had enough." And I thought, okay.
Yeah, no warning or nothing?
No, I mean, he just said, "It's time for me to go."
Yeah.
And he's a guy that I have just a huge amount of respect for, and so he said, "You need to put in for this job."
Yeah.
And he said, "There's probably other people that could do it, but nobody's qualified to do it the way you are at this point." And so I put in. There was one other person that put in for it, and it's funny. He just basically said, "I wasn't going to give it to you."
I just wanted you to have to beat somebody.
I wanted you to have to interview and at least compete against somebody.
Right.
And so I laughed, and we went through the interview process, and so I was named chief of the department in 2016, and been doing it ever since.
Been doing it ever since. That's awesome.
At that time, the mayor Cantrell was on the board of the fire commission at that time, and she said I was the youngest paid chief in the state at that time.
Yeah. At what, 30-something years old?
Oh, what was that? 36?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How old are you right now?
43.
All right, so you're about 5 years older than me.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I remember when they announced you as chief, I thought, man, he ain't been there that long, and I knew you were pretty young, so kudos to you. It sounds like God opened doors, and
that's really the only thing I can, it all started with one guy who was trying to get out of a job.
Yeah.
But he had to talk me into taking it.
Right.
And then, you fast forward, 4 or 5 years, and I was given the keys to the kind of the management of the entire show. So,
well, I mean, I don't have much dealings with the fire department or EMS. Well,
that's good.
Let me back up. Yeah, no, I will back up. In 2016, so you probably would have been the chief. I did have a bad wreck in Graves County, and I had to ride the ambulance for that. That's the only dealings I've had with EMS and fire, and they did me pretty good.
Well, good, good.
Yeah. And you'd only been the chief, maybe a few months. So
right.
I didn't write any bad letters.
You got to give me some grace period to fix all those things. Right.
Give you a little time to fix the bad things. So how do your firemen? What are they thinking of it? Of you being chief when you took it? I'm not saying
so
now per se.
I always felt. I always felt like I had something to prove.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, there were people on that department that, now, by choice, they chose not to go the administrative route.
A lot of them guys love that 24-40.
Oh, absolutely.
I know several guys that work on the fire department. Yeah, they love that.
And so by choice, they didn't put in for that job.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there was a little bit of an issue having a 8-year guy.
Yeah,
over them
taking chief
with 7 when they're sitting there with 17, 18 years experience, and so that just motivated me to work even harder, and I really had to humble myself. I don't think I've ever gone into a room and said you will do this just because I said so.
Yeah.
Like that. That's not how I operate.
Right.
I always try to. If you and I are going to sit down and talk about something and debate something, I'm going to be prepared to back up my side of it, and usually I'm going to try to think about the first 3 or 4 questions you're going to ask me, and I'm going to try to have answers prepared for those as well.
Yeah.
Like that's just kind of how my mind works.
Yeah.
And so that's anytime something's come up, whether it be a budget talk or new protocols or policy changes, I try to be the most prepared person in the room. And so I think pretty quickly people learned that I was going to work on the best interest of the men and women of the department, and also the community and the budget. And I'm going to try to do the best I can to satisfy all the different sets of eyes looking at me.
Right.
Yeah.
To me, it sounds like you did well as far as stepping into that role of not letting the title go to your head, not
Never
running up in there. Because I'm a firm believer of I don't ever want to be the smartest person in the room. There's times where I am, but that's not should ever be your goal. You
Absolutely.
should surround yourself. So you got guys on shift or on the leaders of, I don't really know what y'all call it.
Well, we call them battalions.
Okay.
So you've got A, B, and C shift.
All right. So you got your battalion leaders who've got 17 years. It would be silly of you to go in there and be like, all right, let me tell you how you're going to do it.
Absolutely.
No, they have more experience and been through more stuff than before you even hired on, I'm sure.
So my goal has been, like, what can I do to make your shift run more efficiently?
Gotcha.
Like, what are the tools that you need?
Yeah.
What's the equipment?
Be a support
Yeah.
per se.
Yeah. And so, I call it servant leadership. And I mean, that's a pretty common term. I never want to be the guy that stands up before everybody and puffs their chest out and, like you said, and say, you'll do what I said just because I have the authority to say it.
You see this rank I have on my collar?
That's not me.
Yeah.
Honestly, one of the first things I did, and it maybe ruffled a few feathers, but when I took over, the chief officers wore white shirts, and then your rank and file guys wore blue shirts. After about 6 months, I said, no, I'm going to wear blue just like everybody else.
Yeah.
And I didn't tell my assistant chiefs they had to change, but not initially. But now part of it, my wife got tired of me getting white shirts dirty, and so there was always blood or vomit or dirt or something. Every time you put your turnout gear on, you have these stains.
Yeah.
But that's really how we operate in Mayfield. You're just not that guy. We don't have enough people to be that guy that, I don't respond on calls anymore.
Yeah.
But I wanted everybody to know that I do not put myself above them. Like, I have a job, and everything is clearly laid out in my job description what I'm responsible for.
Yeah.
But I do not hold myself in a higher standard than, or I don't hold myself above anybody.
Yeah.
And that's that's always what I've tried to put across.
Yeah. That's good. Servant. Sorry, I drew blank for a second. It's hard sometimes hosting because I'm really trying to pay attention to what you're saying.
Right.
But sometimes you'll say something, I'm like, ooh, I got to remember to
Thinking
ask him
about the next
one.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you, as a first responder, why do you think, and the one word you said is what triggered it to me, but why do you think that is such a fulfilling job? Because I enjoyed it whenever I did it. My little brother, he's a police officer. I know he really enjoys his job. They're not very well paid jobs, especially starting out. You can make a good career of it eventually, but when you start out, you're not making great money. But there is a lot of fulfillment to the first responder job. Why do you think it is?
Well, it's that, like, you can have such an impact on somebody's life. When somebody calls 911 and their husband or their wife or their child is laying in the floor and maybe they're having a seizure for the first time.
Yeah.
And I mean their entire world is collapsing around them as they watch that loved one.
Yeah. In that moment, that's the most important thing in their life.
In that moment, they don't know what to think. And so when we get there, obviously we're patient care focused, but at the same time we're comforting the family.
Yeah.
we're talking them through what we're doing, why we're going to the hospital that we're going to, and so then we make our best clinical judgment. We give them medication to help if it's that seizure. We're going to stop that seizure, and then we're going to take them to a hospital where they can get definitive care. And so like you have to you have to want to be that person for somebody. We have people that come and work, and some people, they do it for 6 months and then they're gone, and they don't have that servant's heart. If you go into it, like you said, a job that in the beginning may not pay great, long hours, dirty, sometimes you're up all night, and if you have a me mentality about it, you're going to be disappointed, because the me is going to do without sleep, and new cars and big houses, and but if you look at it as an opportunity to help somebody, to help your brother, to love your neighbor, like if you go into it with that type of mindset, it's as fulfilling as any career out there.
So where I was going with that, and I was hoping you would go down this road, and you did. So there is something to be said about, as human beings, in a sense, we're created to serve. And even like in the church, a lot of times, one of the reasons I got such fulfillment out when I did it is you are serving others and you're helping others. And there's nothing wrong with saying that makes you feel good, really, to help others. But that's the way God created us. That's the way He designed us to be. He designed us to serve and worship Him, but we also get a lot of joy of serving and helping others. So a lot of times when people are going through bad things, me being as a leader of our church, when they have their own struggles sometimes that they're going through, sometimes they need to work on themselves. But a lot of times, sometimes I'm like, you just need to get out there and serve.
Yeah.
And you'll find some joy and some peace just by serving others. And so I'll encourage them, hey, get in this role right here and just serve. Give me 6 months and see how you feel. It don't even take 6 months. A month later, they're like, man, thank you so much for encouraging me to serve. I see that either A, they see that I don't have it as bad as I thought, because now I'm serving others who have it worse, or B, they're getting some fulfillment through that servitude, and then that helps them too. So
yeah, I feel like we're just inundated in the world today with like the selfie mentality. I need to put something out and then see everybody's responses to it.
Yeah.
Like it's a very selfish, like self-centered.
We're very consumer based.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what can you do for me?
And well, I made a post and you didn't comment about it. Like who cares?
Yeah.
It's like, instead of being mad, like how many people have you complimented today?
Yeah.
Or how many people have you helped today? I see that as a difference in society, and as a follower, we're commanded to love the Lord with all of our heart, and we're to love your neighbor. And I mean, those are the two chief commandments.
Yeah. All other commandments fall under those two.
Everything falls under those.
Yeah.
And so if you're loving your neighbor, then you're serving your neighbor, because we all have neighbors and friends that need something.
Yeah.
And so now, and in that, hopefully you have a neighbor that's serving you when you need it. And I mean, that's the way the Christian life is supposed to work.
But even if you don't, you find joy and fulfillment in
Absolutely.
serving others.
Absolutely.
In serving others. And I don't think people realize that. That's where I get into a lot of people who are in that consumer mindset. And it may not even be their fault. It's just the world that we live in. That's just the way we're programmed through social media and these phones and all that.
It's a tough cycle to break.
It is. But if you can ever get somebody to break it and learn and try serving others, they find joy in that. And they're like, how did I not know about this before? I'm like, I've been trying to tell you for 6 months,
Yeah.
So that's awesome. Enough about fire department for now.
Okay.
I want to go back to your faith journey here. So you got all this going on with your career. What's your faith journey looking like during this? Because you're a man just like the rest of us. You got wife, you got kids, you got to make money, pay bills, you got a career, and you got to follow God through all this too. So what does that balance look like for you?
So, it's tough.
Yeah.
When I was working the 24/48s, it's hard to get into a real rhythm at church because every third Sunday you're not there.
Yeah. See, I did swing shift for 7 years, so I know what you're talking about.
Right.
We were two. You make it to two, but then you're working two.
Right. So then there were times when you get off work at 7 a.m. on Sunday morning, if you work Saturday, and you are dead tired. And so it's all you can do to stay awake through a church service, much less really worship.
Yeah. You're praying, and then you're like, how long was I out?
Yeah. And so it's tough.
Yeah.
But, going back to that sanctification process, there are times, and we use this kind of as an illustration with our youth at church. It's almost like looking at a stock market ticker. Your stock is rising for a while. Not always at a real high clip. Sometimes you're more like this,
more flat. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you'll hit a dip.
Yeah.
Where things aren't going great. You get off track a little bit, but then you recover. But over time, you've got that upward trend. And so that's. I'm going to say in the last couple of years, I feel like my faith has really. I feel closer. I feel closer to God right now than I ever have in my life.
Yeah.
Now, through those times, there were kind of the ebbs and flows, the ups and downs, but I can definitely say that I'm better now. Like you said, I don't suck as bad today, hopefully, as I did 10 years ago.
I think you should always be able to, if you're sanctifying, like God intended. I should be able to look at the me 5 years ago and be disappointed in that person, or be like, "Dang, you were really sucking, dude." And I hope the me 5 years from now looks back at the me now and is like, "Dude, you were sucking."
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the way it should be. Then we're moving up and to the right.
And it also goes back to what we were just talking about. I feel closer. Like I feel closer to Christ. I feel closer to God as I serve more. As more opportunities open up to serve, whether it's in church or in the community, I feel that closeness to God in a way that I've never felt before.
So right now y'all are at First Baptist here in Mayfield. So when did you make the switch from Sedalia to First Baptist?
So we went to I guess in 2019 we went to the Living Christmas Tree at First Baptist.
Yeah, they put that on every year.
And it was my first time visiting the church, and we felt really welcome at the time. Wes Fowler, he was the pastor there, and he and I had worked together on several projects. Just that small tornado that hit the north end of the city, we were on a committee together where we were going through applications for people, to give out assistance and things like that. And so he and I had worked together in several different capacities. We were both board members at the hospital together and had a pretty good friendship. And so we visited and went to the Living Christmas Tree. And we were living in town at the time. We had sold our house, and we were in the process of building. And so, First Baptist was like 0.2 of a mile from us, and we were there that night, and we realized, oh, hey, I work with this person. I've known this person my whole life. I've known these people, and it felt like home.
Yeah, you had a lot of community there.
There was a lot of people there that Kelly and I both knew, and we were sitting at home one night, and I said, would you like to go visit on a Sunday, and she said, I was thinking the same thing, and I said, well, let's go.
Yeah.
And so we kind of visited for a few months, and we actually started attending regularly around February of 2020, and I had met with Wes about becoming members, and then COVID hit,
Right. Yeah.
and everything got shut down.
Yeah.
And so we were in the process of we were going to come forward and join First Baptist and make the move official, and that happened. So Wes called me one day and he's like, "Are you guys still wanting to join?" I said, "Well, yeah, but we're at online services.
No
How do we do
church.
it?"
Yeah.
He said, "I think it'd be pretty cool if you guys came and we could show our church that the Lord's still working, the Lord's still adding to our body." And so we went to First Baptist.
Mm-hmm.
We were the only people in the building besides the pastoral staff.
Yeah.
And we came forward, and we had to keep our distance, at the time, and all that good stuff.
We know that didn't make a hill of beans.
yeah, that's a whole different topic. That's a podcast.
That's a whole podcast
in and of itself. Yeah. And so we joined in March of 2020.
Yeah.
And we've been there ever since.
That's really cool that he did that, though. I like the way that Pastor West come up with that idea. Let's let people know that God's still on the move, even though that we can't meet.
And that's what we talked about. He said everybody feels separated right now.
Yeah, isolation.
And everybody's upset because what's going to happen to our church.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, let's show anybody who's watching online that what the Lord's still doing in our church.
I was me and my family were really fortunate during COVID that we were a part of the worship team. Mm-hmm. And so we were still coming to the building every Sunday. And, probably just like y'all's church, there was less than 10 of us here.
Right.
Count the pastor and a few production people and worship, But I don't know. Really, I would like to think I didn't get tested in this way, but I would like to think my faith would have remained strong to, be regular and even view online and continue to be a part of the body. But I know it's hard for a lot of people.
Oh, it was tough. We would turn on the service, and at that time, Livy, my youngest, she was 5 years old. Mm-hmm. My other two, they were 7th and 8th grade, mm-hmm. and it's hard to focus.
Yeah,
it's hard to keep them keep everybody dialed in.
Yeah.
So
everybody's probably in their PJs. And I think I'll get a snack real quick. Like, no, we're not doing that right now.
Everybody, before you know it, somebody's opening the refrigerator door. Hey, Dad, can you pause it for a second?
Yeah.
I want to, like you said, I need to get something to eat, or I want to get a drink, or
where's the reverence in that? Where's the reason you come to church is one, to gather the body together, but it's ultimately to worship God.
Right.
In that moment, that's what you're to be doing. So, doing it at home through a TV screen, and I think that's a great tool because there are people who are sick or injured and can't. Don't get me wrong, I think it's a great tool, but to some it's a crutch, and you're losing the primary reason for the gathering of the body, which is.
Yeah, just for fellowship and the edification of one another, and so that's it's been so. It's just been really good to get back, and in 2020, in the midst of all that, we were able to go on a mission trip to Arizona with our church, and
Nice.
So that was a way for us to, we really didn't have a lot of relationships built. We knew a lot of people in the church, but not everybody knew that we were regular attendees, and they didn't know that we had joined. If they missed the online service, they missed seeing us join.
Right.
And so it as things kind of changed and we're back and forth in 20, we were able to go on the mission trip. Kelly and I, we served that year as the medical staff which was a challenge, during the COVID.
Yeah. So real quick, that's something that y'all do every year, and y'all go to an Indian reservation, right?
Yes.
And
So
put on a youth camp, basically.
so we actually the city's called Prescott, Arizona. We rent a youth camp up in the mountains
Yep.
in Arizona, and we bus. It's a combination. It's a really cool combination. So the natives from a couple of different tribes. There's a pastor out there that's called Live Love Ministries.
Yeah, we have. So Lori and Steve DeLapp, who go to church here, their kids are
Yeah.
out there full time now.
Yep. So they're out there they've been out there for years.
Yeah.
And so they've developed these relationships on the different reservations.
Yep.
And they open it up for kids to go to camp. And so there's kids from all the different reservations out there. And then Phoenix also has a really large population of Congolese refugees.
Okay.
So Eric and Brittany are also active in that community. And so it's a mix. When we take, like this last year, I think there was 120. It's a mix of Native American kids from different tribes, different subcultures,
Right.
and then these Congolese refugees.
Wow.
And we rent out a camp, and we go up there for the entire week, and we put on a church camp for them.
Yeah.
And
Talk about a melting pot of people there.
It is awesome.
Yeah.
It is awesome.
And then a bunch of white folks from Western Kentucky going down there to
Absolutely.
to teach them about Jesus and show them the love of Christ. That's awesome.
Yeah. It's really turned into one of the highlights of the year for us. Like we love it. We were able to take my oldest daughter this last year, and she loved it. It's a fantastic week.
I feel like that's something pretty soon in my own walk that I need to set some time aside for is some kind of mission trip.
Yeah, it'll change
and take like my oldest is going to be 16 in a couple weeks, so it'd be cool to take him. And just I know for some, so I have a little bit of advantage over most being in the military. I've been to several third world countries,
right?
Not on a mission trip, but I've seen. So I already know what I would be getting myself into. But you take like my 16-year-old son who's never wanted for anything a day in his life.
Absolutely.
And he's much like you and me. He's grown up in church. He's always known, Jesus. He surrendered to the Lord at 7, I believe it was. So, I mean, he's all he ever known, unicorns and butterflies. I'm like, son, it ain't like that everywhere.
Right.
And I know he knows that, but knowing it and experiencing it are two different things.
And it's eye-opening to realize that it's way closer than than a third world country.
It's even in this country.
In the continental United States of America, like there are still people that don't have running water in their homes.
Yeah, Lori and Steve have showed me some pictures from some of the reservation, different tribes in the reservation and how they live, and I'm like, that's not much better than what I see some families live in Afghanistan, and I've been there,
Right. And so it's just awesome. Some of these kids, their home environments aren't great.
Yeah.
There's a lot of alcoholism, drug abuse, things like that on the reservations, and it's a very depressing. It's just a tough place to grow up.
Yeah.
And so to remove them from that environment for a week, this last year I was with a kid and we were on a hike, and he said I've never seen a tree before. So I mean he had been in the desert with a cactus but where we were up in the mountains at Prescott, there was pine trees and and he said I've never seen trees before.
Wow.
Just it's a really cool experience.
Yeah, you take that into perspective. You start to look at that and think, man. Yeah, and that goes back to the serving thing too.
Absolutely.
How much joy and fulfillment you get out of it.
Absolutely.
You probably you probably don't, but in a sense, you get equally as much out of it as they do.
Oh,
or
absolutely.
maybe more.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's coming home, you almost kind of you're kind of on a high.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like is not boasting in what you've
Right.
just done, but just to know that like you feel like you've had an impact on somebody
Yeah.
in a positive way.
I mean, you've had a spirit-filled week of,
Absolutely.
pouring into, you're being filled from serving, and the Holy
Yeah.
Spirit's filling you and preparing you, and
And there are kids that have come to this camp for 4, 5, 6 years in a row, and to see one of those kids give his life to Christ.
yeah,
We got to see that, and then a couple of days later, he immediately went to his little sister, and started witnessing to her.
started giving her the
And
gospel. That's awesome.
2 days later, she gave her life to Christ,
Yeah.
and it's like so. It's like it's just amazing because you think just well, when you leave the 99 to go save the one,
Mm-hmm.
well, sometimes the one can have a huge impact in the world,
Yeah.
and so it's just awesome to see what these young people are going to do, what God's going to do in their lives,
Yeah.
and through their lives how He can change the places where they live.
Yeah. A cool story. I've talked about it a little bit on this too, but he's a pastor, part of the Destiny Institute that our church is like a member of,
Mhm.
But he's a pastor that's came a couple of times, and he was ex-Special Forces. I've talked about him on the podcast a couple of times. Pastor Mike Acosta is his name. And what led him to the Lord was a lady in the checkout of the grocery store giving him an invitation to a revival or something, and then he ends up surrendering to the Lord, and now he has a international evangelist ministry.
Right.
He's a pastor. I think he's an associate pastor of a big church, but he also goes all over the country and to India and all these places, and thousands, probably tens of thousands of people have come to know Christ, all because one lady gave invitation to a revival in the checkout of a grocery store.
Yeah.
And so in my mind, I'm thinking the same thing for you. You spend a week at a camp, and you, in a sense, you help, show these kids Christ, and they surrender their life, and you never know the impact that they're going to have on generations
Absolutely.
to come.
So, have you ever heard of J.D. Greer?
Yeah, I know
Yeah,
he is.
podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Has a big church. Well, I believe it was in one of his sermons that he said he was telling a story of a pastor in the Carolinas and Virginias that he did a revival, and he was so excited about the revival. He had prepared new sermons and just gone over them and gone over them and gone over them, and he preached the entire revival throughout the week, and at the end of it, he was really disappointed because only one person had come forward and professed faith,
Mm-hmm.
and so he was really dejected about it, and I think went home and basically told his family he felt like a failure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that one person who came to know Christ during that week was Billy Graham.
Yeah.
And so you fast forward 20, 30, 40 years, probably one of the greatest evangelists of modern
Yeah.
times.
Probably helped lead millions of people
Millions.
to Christ. Yeah.
And so that guy, he sold himself short,
Mm-hmm.
but look at what the one
Yeah.
what the one did
Yeah.
down
Look at
the
the
road.
multiplication
Yeah.
because of that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a try to look at every opportunity like that.
Yeah, and I've had that struggle even with this podcast, because I put out an episode just like an announcement. I had to step back with the amount, the quantity that I was putting out because I am a dad and a husband, and I have a full-time job, and I serve in my local church. So I was doing it a lot, basically every week in the beginning. But now that I've built up some content, I'm like, all right, I got to step back, and I got to maintain quality, still get good quality people, have quality conversations. But I was struggling with for a while there with put out an episode, and yeah, it may get 1,000 views, and I get like 1 or 2 likes. Back to the thing, us. You didn't like my stuff, and then I had to have that inner talk with God of, is this worth it? Is my time worth it? And then, some of my accountability brothers were like, is one person worth it? And I'm like, well, yeah, it is. And then he's like, all right, if one person comes to know Christ because of this podcast, is that worth it? That's what you have to ask yourself. And I'm like, absolutely, it's worth it. He's like, all right, then shut up and keep putting out the podcast. I'm like, okay.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Sometimes as men, we need that good, stern talking to you.
You need somebody to bring you back down, humble you a little bit, and remind you of the why.
Yeah. And even my friends, I don't know if you've seen the squared circles we do. It's basically the Bible study. 4 of us just sit around a table and talk. And, that's what I encourage them before we start every episode. I'm like, hey, guys, remember we're doing this, even if it's just one, right? And they're all like, yeah, we're all in.
Yeah.
And I'm fortunate enough that I've got brothers around me that are all in just for the one, if it happens to be. And we even look in Scripture, it says that even the angels in heaven, they celebrate when a multitude come to Christ. Well, what's a multitude? Just one more.
Right.
Every time one more comes. So you just got to think. You just have to have that one more mindset. I think that's really good. We got down a rabbit hole there. I got lost in my conversation. No, that's good. It's all good. That's what I love about long form content is you do have time to. Ooh, that's a good topic. Let's get. It's on me, the host, to let's reel us back into where we were. So we talked a little bit about COVID. You joining First Baptist during COVID time. At what point did you and your wife decide, all right, we need to start serving? And then now you serve as a deacon. Was that your next step? How did you get there?
So we joined in 2020. They came to us, and 2020 was a very unique year for a lot of reasons, but. For some reason, the normal medical team, or the people that served on the medical portion of the mission trip, they couldn't go that year. So I can remember Paul Wilkerson. He was an associate pastor at the time, and we had just started coming back to services to where you could sit like every other row, and we had all the weird rules, And they came to us, or he came to us one day, and he's like, "Hey, I know you guys are new here, but I just need to see if you guys would be interested in something."
Yeah.
And we're like, "Well, what can we do?" And he said, "Well, we need medical staff. Jeremy, you're a paramedic. Kelly, you're a nurse, and we can't go on the mission trip unless we have medical."
Gotcha.
And he said, "No, I'm not trying to put pressure on you." He was really cool about it. Paul's such a good guy.
Great guy.
He said, just think about it, pray about it, and if you're interested, let us know.
Yeah.
So we went home and we talked about it, and neither one of us love to fly. But it's just not
happening, huh?
It's just not one of my favorite things to do.
Okay.
And it's definitely not one of Kelly's favorite things to do. But at the same time, we were like, this is an opportunity for us to serve.
Yeah.
Outside of our comfort zone. This is different than just keeping the nursery.
Yeah,
or
kind of step of faith too.
Yeah, it's a step of faith.
Yeah.
And do we want to be a reason why for the first time in however many years they don't get to go?
Yeah.
So we thought about it a little bit, prayed about it, and very quickly decided we're going to go.
Yeah.
And just went and loved it.
Yeah. So y'all's first big step in serving was that camp.
Yeah,
that's cool.
So when we got back from that camp, during that week, we really got to know the children's pastor, Blake Shoecraft. We we got to know Paul a little bit better, and so I started working with Blake in the youth ministry some, and just volunteering and helping, and just kind of trying to plug ourselves in as we can, where we can, and
Right.
and so that's kind of where that started. And so for I guess almost between 2 and 3 years, I've been helping with the youth program at First Baptist. I'll fill in and teach, when Blake isn't there. Usually there if we break off into small groups, I'll have a group that I take care of. Both of my older 2 daughters are in that youth group, so it's a good chance for me to spend some time with them and do some things with them. And then a couple of years ago, I was asked to be a part of the safety team for the church, and that's one that I was honestly I was a little hesitant because like that is my comfort zone.
Yeah.
And I thought, that this is kind of that easy one to do.
Feels like cheating almost.
Yeah, and it's like, but there was a need, so I agreed to help with that. But I told him, I said, I'm reluctant to do this because like I feel like it's almost too easy.
Yeah.
But so I help with security and safety at church, and then just within the last couple of months, I was asked to be on the leadership team for the men's ministry, and so we're trying to kind of rejuvenate, kickstart that men's ministry program, nice. And so there's a group of us that are just working through, praying through how to start that back up, kind of post COVID, and then last year I was elected and ordained as a deacon in the church. So, if you're not serving in church, typically it's because you're not willing to serve.
Yeah.
There's always a place to plug in. There's
Yeah.
always a place to plug in,
Yeah.
and just like we've been talking about, it's a very fulfilling opportunity, and it's I love it.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
I just hearing you talk, much like your career as a fire and EMS, it sounds like your servitude has really. To me, you seem like a guy when opportunity presents itself and God's opened doors for you. You're like, all right, this door's open. I'm gonna step right into it. No hesitancy, really.
Well, yeah, my wife says I'm really bad. I don't say no.
Yeah. You're a yes man.
I'm a yes man.
Me too, man. It's okay.
And I get in some trouble from time to time, but it's one of those things that if somebody calls and says, "We need you," or "We'd like to have you," I try to figure out a way to help them.
Yeah.
And if that requires a meeting at lunch one time a month, then I'll go do it.
Right.
Or if it's serving on Wednesday nights at church, I'll go do it.
Yeah. Or if a guy asks you to be on his podcast.
Yeah. Or if it's white knuckling, the seat in front of you on a 4-hour plane ride to Phoenix, then that's part of it too.
Yeah.
It's just that, and that's part of I think the way the Lord has changed me is kind of peeling away the selfish and helping me to see that it's the joy comes from service.
Yeah. Making you into the man
Absolutely.
That he wants you to be. Do you think you get there without service? Without serving others?
Absolutely not.
No.
I mean, faith without works is dead.
Yeah, I agree. I just wanted to hear your opinion on it. I feel you were on a roll, man. I just wanted to keep you going.
Yeah.
So,
I have a really hard time when people say, and like I'm not getting anything out of church, because that's not why we're here.
Yeah.
we're here to praise.
Yeah.
We're not here to take something home ourselves.
Right.
And so I have to bite my tongue a lot when
Yeah.
I hear people say things like that.
So, my wife is the worship leader here.
Mhm.
I'm on the worship team, along with a dozen other things. Like you said, if you're not serving because you can't find a place, it's really because you don't want to, because there's
Right.
plenty of places. But one of my favorite things to hear, and I don't hear it often, very often at all at our church, but it's to somebody to say, I didn't really like the worship today, or something like that, to which I want to say, who cares? We ain't worshiping you to begin with.
Yeah. The worship isn't meant
It's
for
not
you.
for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now there are several times, from the stage, me or my wife or whoever's maybe leading a song, help to remind people, because we do live in that. It's easy to get in that consumer mindset. And if I'm sure y'all's church is set up similar. Well, right now you are at the high school, but so I know you're set up in a similar way. But if you think about it, everything happens on a stage out to the congregation. So it's set up like a concert or a movie, almost like, what are y'all going to entertain us with today?
Right.
Really, the church, the modern day church, is set up in a horrible way. It's set up to feel like they're in there to consume something. And
Right.
in a sense they are. There's a message coming forth, but that's not why we're here. We're here to worship and praise God. So I don't know how we could set it up different, but it needs to be set up different.
Well, and go back to Arizona real quick. This last year, we had 2 services a day, song service in each of before the lesson sermon, and to hear these kids sing out, I mean, just with their hearts, praising God. I told Paul and Blake that I almost think it should be mandatory for the members of our church to go on the mission at least once
And experience it.
and experience that, because I think it'll change the way you come back and praise God.
Yeah. It'll change the way you worship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It changed it to see. I mean, it's just raw emotion.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times we've got to sit in our seat, and we've got to, we've got a certain, the songs we like. Some people like the newer songs. Some people like the older songs from the hymnals. And everybody kind of has their way. And but to just see like the pure just joy of the worship of some of these kids, like it changes you. Same thing about, I guess it was back in August. I took my 2 oldest daughters and one of their friends to a Brandon Lake concert in St. Louis, and to hear 15,000 people sing Gratitude together.
Yeah.
Like, it's about as emotional as it gets.
Yeah.
Like I mean, I'm up there, just tears running down my face. Like that worship, like that's how we should all be worshiping.
Yeah.
And if you have that mindset, you'll never say I didn't get anything out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get a little bit frustrated. I kind of identify and find myself leaning more towards some of the newer Reformed guys, but I do get frustrated with them sometimes when they start talking about, well, we got to be careful about the music and creating emotion and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, worship is emotional.
It is emotional.
It should be. I mean, we're pouring out and offering praise up to our Creator, our Savior, our Lord. It should be emotional.
Yeah.
If you can do that feeling no emotion, then I would question, is He Lord and Savior?
Do you understand the magnitude of the God that you're worshiping?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So to say like, well, we got to be careful about setting the mood and emotional. Worship is emotional.
Absolutely.
I don't
worship
understand
should be
it.
responsive.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
understand it.
Yeah.
So I mean, and this is me coming from a place of went to only small Southern Baptist churches
Right.
where we only sang hymnals with a piano.
Right.
To now I serve and lead in a contemporary church. I hated it. The first
Right.
time we came here, going back to certain people like it a certain way. When we first came here and came to this church, I mean, we're talking lights and smoke. It's a lot bigger back then than it is now. We've went through a leadership change. But anyways,
Right.
I remember thinking, this is a concert. This ain't church. And
Right.
my wife went to contemporary church, so she's loving it. And I'm like, yeah, we ain't never coming back here to this cult.
Right.
That's where
Right.
I was when I first. And of course, then we came here once and didn't. I was like, yeah, we ain't going back there.
Yeah.
And so then we went back to some of my roots, and then I was happy, but she wasn't.
Right.
And so we dealt with that for a little bit of where do we really find home for both of us. And for whatever reason, I think we actually went through a stint of where we weren't going anywhere, and then we came back here again, and it was better. I can't remember what was different about it, but it was a little bit better. And then we came again, and it was a little bit better, and I started to enjoy the worship more, and I started to really understand, like you said, the magnitude of, and then, fast forward 8 or 10 years, and now I'm on the worship team,
Right.
and my wife is our worship leader. It's crazy how God works.
Absolutely.
When you look back on stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and I grew up in the Church of Christ where there are no instruments.
No instruments.
It's
yeah.
all a cappella music,
Mhm.
and so when when we started attending Sedalia, just having music was a change for
Yeah.
me, and then just progression, and like I love our worship at church. It's even though we're not in our church, we're at Grace County High School. Like it's one of my favorite parts of my week, and but yeah, just like experiencing that emotion of singing together, praising together, kind of all one heart. Like it's a really powerful thing when it all comes together the right way.
I didn't really understand for a long time the tangible presence of God in a room until, like I said, the past 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
Believer in God, surrendered my life to God, but to feel that tangible presence, I remember the first time feeling that raw emotion and feeling that tangible presence of God and being like, this is something new. I've not ever felt this before, And once you get a taste of that, then you don't ever want it any other way.
Absolutely.
I feel like that's where I am with that. Now, the whole Church of Christ thing, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but I do want to sit down with somebody. I have a lot of friends who are Church of Christ, real close friends. I want to know where they get that. Even in Scripture, David talks about playing harps and lyres and praising unto the Lord. Like, why not the music? I just don't understand it.
I'm not real sure.
I ain't either. Like I said, I wanted somebody who would know. Sometimes sit down.
I can't quote the verse. I know that there was a verse that I've heard quoted, like "Sing and make a melody in your heart."
Yeah.
But there's also Scripture with harps. And,
David talks about praising and dang, I wish I could quote what it was. Now I'm terrible about that. But he talks about praising unto the Lord with harps and lyres and song and drums, and he even danced like a crazy fool, and exposed himself. He gets so he was probably the first Pentecostal. All right, so I kind of want to talk a little bit about merging the two worlds. Like we've talked about. Hey, we talked about your professional career as a first responder. We talked about the faith. I want to talk a little bit about how the two come together for you, like living out. One of the big things I want to inspire men on this podcast is not to just be men who we go to church on Sunday and I'm this man then, and then Monday through Saturday in my professional career I'm a different person, because I went through that in my own self of God exposing my hypocrisy.
Absolutely.
To me, of like, the man that you are on Sunday is not necessarily the man that you are on Monday through Saturday. Why not? I had that inner conviction and maybe a little slap on the butt. So what does that look like for you as chief?
Well, I'll say I went through the same thing. The language, that I would use Monday through Friday, or
Yep.
That's the thing of the past. The controlling my emotions, my temper, and now this is just something I do on my desk. If you come to my office and sit down to meet with me, I keep my Bible within eyesight of me and whoever I'm talking to.
Right.
And I keep it there as a reminder to myself that of the type of person I need to be, of what I need to represent.
Yeah.
And I also keep it there so they know, like, this is what's important to me.
Yeah.
And so that's something that just within the last couple of years I've started doing, and I keep it there. If my Bible is in my briefcase or in my backpack, I'll forget to read it.
Yeah.
When I'm taking a 10-minute break.
Yeah, yeah.
If it's on my desk, I'll shut my laptop and I'll open it up and do my daily reading.
Yeah.
But it's also there as a reminder to me of what I'm supposed to represent, and even when I'm having really tough conversations about, it could be disciplinary action, or it could be, we need to talk about this complaint that's come in. There still, as a follower of Christ, there are certain ways I need to conduct myself.
Yeah.
And so that I keep that there as a visual cue, as a visual reminder of how I need to present myself.
Yeah. What about discipleship as far as in the workforce? I know it's different, and it's not something that you can probably openly do, but do you try and maybe instill your faith in some of your leadership? Make sense?
I try. It's one of those things, I think everybody that works for me knows that they can come to me. I try to be open, transparent with everybody on my department. We had a groundbreaking for the new fire station this past Monday, and in the speech I had to give, I quoted scripture. I don't hide that. I don't really let any fear of separation of church and state. Like I don't really worry about that. Now, do I harass people? No.
Yeah.
You have to. Like I said, I think most people at this point know where I stand, and they know that I'm there if they ever have a question or want to sit down and talk, and for if somebody's having a hard time, I'll just say, hey, I'm going to put you on my prayer list. And does that make sense?
No,
just try to.
So there are ways that we should live out our lives as Christians where people can look at us and realize that we're different.
Absolutely.
They shouldn't, and this is where my own personal conviction lies, and it sounds like you went through the same thing of, I go to work. I work at a chemical plant. Every man that I work with in my maintenance shop are all great men. Would I say any of them are followers of Jesus? Not the way they should be. Right. And I know that because I carried all, I joined in on some of the dirty jokes and the way I talked and all that. And then one day I felt a severe conviction about, I call you to be the man that you are on Sundays every day of the week. And so I started in our break room, which I don't have a desk. I'm not the chief, but
right.
I in my break room, every day I would read my Bible right there at the break. On that first break, I got my Bible out. I'm reading it. I did that every day. Changed the way I talk. Didn't take part in the jokes and all that kind of stuff. And would openly pray. I'm not saying I'm sitting in the break room praying out loud, but I didn't try and hide it.
Right.
I didn't want that to. I wanted to show them who I am and how I meant to act. So fast forward a couple years, and usually I either work solo or I'll have a specific partner I work with. But for whatever reason, my boss stuck me with a different partner, and we're just working. And he goes, Brad, you don't really cuss a lot, do you? And I was like, no, I don't. I said, just within the past couple of years, I felt a lot of conviction about my mouth and how I act. And, I felt like God was, telling me, hey, be the person that I've called you to be every day, not just on Sunday. And he goes, I just want you to know it's really inspiring, and I'm going to try and do better myself.
That's awesome.
Or when I'm reading my Bible, then, I've got one guy who's like, what are you reading about today? And I'm like, oh, well, I'm reading in Samuel, reading about David today, King David. He's like, oh. And, every time he might ask a little bit more. So those things, you start to build rapport, you start to build relationship with the guys, and then the conversations come from that. I think that's better approach than, let me tell you about Jesus, buddy.
Right.
Because they may not be ready for it
Right.
yet. And then they now you need to be ready. If they come to you and say, "Hey, tell me about this Jesus," you need to be ready.
Absolutely.
To give them the gospel.
And I think you and I are very much kind of shared the same path in a lot of ways,
Mm-hmm.
because I was that guy that sitting around the table and just the language and just all those different types of things, and I felt very much convicted, like if I wouldn't say this in front of my kids, what does God want me saying it sitting at this table?
Right.
And so that's been a change that I've had to make, and it's a slow progress, and just like everything else,
It's sanctification, just like everything else.
Just like everything else,
Yeah.
and being able to be more open about, like you said, just prayer,
Mm-hmm.
or when you're. If I have to speak publicly, like this last week, I had to go to Owensboro to an EMS conference, and they probably didn't want me to, but I talked about my faith during that conference.
Yeah.
They can ask me to leave if they want.
Yeah.
That's. But I mean, I tell people faith is what's brought me through the last nearly 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Faith, family, and coffee. That's kind of where it's been. And
That's my next T-shirt, by the way. It's going to say "Fueled by the Holy Spirit and caffeine."
there you go. but yeah, it's that I'm on board with it. Exactly what you've just been laying out. It's just the changes we make over time.
Yeah, it's got to be. I mean, we just got to suck a little bit less every day.
That's right.
And people. God clearly calls us to be set apart.
Absolutely.
We're to be. We have to live in the world, but we're not to be of the world. And then through that, Christ's love will show, and then people start to ask, and then you get the opportunity to give them the gospel.
Yep.
Jesus says, "No man comes to me unless the Father draws him." So there is a time and a place where God's going to draw him, and like Isaiah, here I am, send me.
Exactly.
I want to be that guy that's ready with the gospel when they're ready to hear it.
Exactly.
In that moment. So, and it's all God's timing. I just want to take the opportunity and say thanks for watching At the Ready up to this point. If you like the content that we have to share, just take the time to like, share, subscribe. Go and leave us a positive 5-star review on wherever you're watching this. Apple Podcasts is a big one. So we can just spread the word of At the Ready and continue to reach more people with our content. So thank you so much for supporting the show and watching. Now let's get back to the show. All right, so let's get into the big news that's happened here in our town. We've danced all around it without saying it, but
Yeah.
And you just said faith is what's got me through the last 3 years, and you had a big part in it. So for those of you who don't live in Mayfield, December 2021, we had a EF4, almost EF5.
4 miles an hour away from being
Yeah.
an EF5. Yeah.
Tornado come through. Not only was it big, but like how long it was on the ground. It was like 2 miles wide, I heard, or maybe a mile and a half.
It stayed on the ground. It was the longest tornado, I guess, destruction path in the history of the state of Kentucky.
200 and something miles?
I believe so, about 220 miles.
I know you could get on Google Maps, the satellite, for months after, and you could zoom in. You could clearly see the line of destruction it had through there. And so that hit us December 2021. I don't remember the date.
December 10th.
10th, yeah, thank you. December 10th, 2021 is a Friday night. I do know that.
9:26 p.m.
Yeah, I blocked a lot of that out, but
Yeah.
I do know it was at night, a Friday night. Me and my family, we were sitting down watching How the Grinch Stole Christmas. I vividly remember that, and we didn't even lose power. I lived about 2 miles away, by the way the crow flies, away from the path of the tornado. So, I'll tell a little bit of my story that night. You tell a little bit of yours. I don't, what were you doing? What was the chief of the fire department doing when that came through?
So, I guess to really get started, we're going to go back to the Sunday before.
Okay.
All right, so Brother Wes is preaching, and at the end of his sermon, he's like, "Hey, just so you know, there's a chance of some severe weather towards the end of the week."
Right.
He said, my dad, of course, that's Brother Barry Fowler. He said, he thinks he's kind of a jackleg weatherman, and he says it's going to get real bad. So, based on what he said, y'all should probably expect sunshine and clear skies.
Yeah.
And of course, everybody jokingly, everybody laughs. But then he says, "No, seriously, keep an eye on the forecast throughout the week, and let's just pray that everything's okay."
Yeah.
So, as the week goes, I get a National Weather Service update through email. They put out conference calls, and so there was a couple of emails that came out that said basically, if things line up a certain way, Friday could get pretty sporty.
Yeah.
And then as Thursday and Friday roll around, the forecasts get a little more pretty certain there's going to be some severe weather. We just don't know how bad.
Right.
So Friday of that week, it's December 10th. It's like 73, 74 degrees outside.
I remember it was crazy warm.
I mean, just super warm outside. And I had checked my forecast. We were out driving. I was out driving through town, and I remember being on the bypass, and I have no idea. Well, I know why. It was the Holy Spirit. I mean, that's the only thing I can attribute it to, because typically, like my whole life, I've been the guy that when there's a severe weather warning, like I'm going to go sit out on the porch and watch the lightning show.
Yeah.
But with the forecast, and I'm just driving, and you just feel this weird energy. And I picked up, I called Station 1, and I said, "Hey, I know I don't normally do this, but with the forecast and us not knowing," I said, "try to get about 4 people to come in and work overtime tonight.
Yeah.
If we can get 3 or 4 people, don't worry about the budget. Let's just have some people here just in case."
Right.
And I never do that. But that day I did.
Mm-hmm.
And so I go back to the station. We get some people to agree to come in. And then at like 3 o'clock that afternoon, I'm out in a T-shirt washing my truck in the back of the parking lot. One of the guys comes up. He's like, "Oh, we're about to get some bad weather tonight. There's no reason for you to be washing your truck." Just joking with me.
Yeah.
And then the phone rings, and it's my wife. And she said, "Hey, Avery, my oldest, they were supposed to play Paducah Tillman basketball at Tillman that night. And game time, I think, was going to be at 7 o'clock. And they said, hey, they moved the game up to 5 o'clock just so they can get the game over with."
I think one of my son's basketball games, they did the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So I said, okay, well, I get off at 4:30, swing by here, pick me up. We'll just go straight to the game. So we drive to Paducah. We're sitting in the gym. A couple people walk by, and I don't know, everybody thinks that I have access to like a forecast that nobody else gets,
Yeah.
And they're like, "Hey, Chief, what are you hearing about tonight?"
Yeah.
It's like, severe weather.
Same thing as you.
The same
buddy.
thing as you. I don't know, whatever Noah said,
Yeah.
And so we're sitting there, and everybody's watching their phone. Everybody's talking about it, asking questions. There's some things happening, I guess, down in Arkansas, and well, the refs call timeout, and I see them walk over, and they pull at the time, Mr. Henderson, who was our superintendent, and Joe Morris, athletic director. They pulled him down, and I think Paducah's superintendent or somebody walked over, and they're having a conversation. Well, then they kind of looked up at me and said, what are you hearing? And they were having a conversation about whether they should stop the game or not. And I basically said, hey, we're in McCracken County. This is well outside of my jurisdiction. All I'm hearing is there's a chance for severe weather right now. And so they agree to finish the game, get the game over with, and so we get in the car rather than riding the bus. Avery rode with us, and so I said, just take me back to the office. I want to be there just in case something happens. And so obviously, I mean, we had to run by Chick-fil-A and get some supper before. Absolutely. I mean, that priorities, right?
When you're in McCracken County somewhere, you got to go Chick-fil-A.
Got to get the Lord's chicken. So we ran by Chick-fil-A, and about this time, it's probably 7:15. We get supper. We're back in Mayfield by 7:45, and at that time, the forecast is getting a little more intense, and so at that point, I sent them home. And I've told a lot of people like that. Thinking back, that's probably the hardest thing I did. Like knowing what could be coming, to send them home without Dad.
Yeah, your protector radar is probably on fire right now.
Yeah. And so, it tore me up to send them home without me. But Kelly, she's like, hey, I'll see you when you get home. And that's just, I love you. I'll see you when you get home. And so I run, I fill my truck up with fuel. I carry a chainsaw in the back of my truck. I was like, I'm going to just do all my checks, my double checks, make sure the equipment I have, just in case there's limbs down and we need to clear streets.
That's what you're thinking in the moment. We're going to get some storms. We're going to maybe have to cut some limbs.
Hail, we'll get some hail, some high winds. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to be prepared to, if we need to get an ambulance out to somebody and we need to cut up a tree limb, which, I mean, we do on a regular basis, we'll send a chase truck out with an ambulance to help get them to where they need to be. And I'm just going to be ready. So I check my equipment. Everything's good. Well, 8:40, 8:50 comes around, and you start seeing what's coming up through West Tennessee. And I want to say it was maybe 5 after 9, between 9:05 and 9:10, they put Mayfield in a tornado warning.
In the direct path.
In the path, it's tracking this way. And like any normal person would do, me and one of my firemen, we go outside and look out towards the west. And so we were standing at the door of the old fire station between City Hall and the fire department, looking back west over the county courthouse. And you could see the lightning. You could hear the rumble. And it was, that old saying, it's like a freight train coming through. You could hear the freight train getting closer. And I remember it started to sprinkle a little bit, and then we started seeing some hail, so we got up under the building, and then that blue-white lightning, I don't know why, but I'll never forget, it turned green. I'll never forget it. And I don't know if maybe it was hitting one of the candle factory, if it had hit Mayfield Grain, where they have chemicals and something was reacting in the air when lightning. I don't know what it was, but that lightning was like a greenish color.
Wow.
And then it got real loud, and I said, okay, it's time for us to go in. So we went in and we got everybody, and we got them in the center of the building. And so there was an office over here, hallway, and then our locker room back here. And I think there were 8 of us in the building, and 3 or 4 of them were behind me in the locker room, and then 3 or 4 of them were down in the office across the hallway. And I just kind of stood in the doorway. I wanted to be able to see everybody.
Yeah.
And I broke every rule of stop and cover, or get down and cover your head. But for whatever reason, I just stood there. And like I said, as it happened, I wanted to be able to see everybody and account for everybody.
Yeah.
So I just stood in that doorway, and I remember I heard the first window break, and when that happened, the whole building pressurized all at once. Mm-hmm. And we had these big wood doors all through the building, and that pressure slammed them all shut at one time. And then when that happened, it was like every window in the place like imploded at one time.
Wow.
And then it was like being in a blender at that point. I mean, there's furniture and paper and dust and debris, and like you could feel the updraft from when it ripped the roof off of the building. When it took the roof off, it took the HVAC units off,
right,
which left holes.
Yeah.
And so you could feel like an updraft in the building.
That's crazy.
And it was probably the scariest 30 seconds of my life. And then just like that, it stopped.
And it's over. Yeah.
It's over. And you basically, is everybody okay? Yeah, Chief. Yeah, Chief. Everybody's good. And boom, we need you en route to the candle factory. Total chaos, total destruction.
Yeah.
And that was the first call that came in.
Gotcha.
And so then I don't remember, but one of my guys said, you just looked at us and said, okay, let's get to work. And that's what we did.
Yeah.
So
everybody there at Station 1 went to the candle factory?
No.
Okay.
No.
Gotcha.
We sent Station 3.
Okay.
They were the first.
Where's it at?
That's the one out by Green Acres on 10th Street.
Okay, yep.
That's the closest station to them.
Yeah.
And so they were able to get out there.
They didn't get hit at all.
Station 3, it actually lifted the roof up off of the building.
Okay.
Kind of like opening a can of Pringles.
Yeah.
And then it just set it right back down. And we really didn't know it until we got up. There was some soffit that came off, mm-hmm. and we got up there to fix it, and the nails that were holding the trusses and everything into the top plate of the they were missing the stud by about 1/8 of an inch.
Gotcha. So you could tell that it picked it up, maybe shifted it a little bit.
It picked it up and just set it right back down. So, but they didn't have any heavy damage.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't even realize that it had happened. So the 4 of them out there, they went to the candle factory first. Station 2,
which is on Broadway.
Yeah. They were responding inside the kind of back behind Midtown.
Yeah.
They were in that area. Mm-hmm. And then us at Station 1, we got hit hard enough that like the first thing we had to do was get our trucks out of the building.
Yeah.
We had heavy steel roll-up doors. Mm-hmm. Well, the pressure of the wind it caved them in.
Oh, crap.
So they wouldn't roll up. And so I had a engine 1, a rescue truck, and four ambulances
stuck in the building. Yeah.
So we go outside. I don't know how. And this is one of those stories that like I'm trying to get a Ford endorsement or like a deal or whatever, but my F-250 is still sitting there on all 4 tires.
Yeah.
And so didn't have a piece of glass left in it.
Right.
Had holes in it. It looked like bullet holes where gravel and stuff had just
went straight through.
Went straight through.
That's crazy.
And but I stuck my key in it, cranked it up. She fired right up, and so we took a tow strap, and we used a K-12 saw and a tow strap in my truck, and we ripped the doors off of the building so we could get our equipment out.
Yeah. Got to have the trucks.
Got to
man.
have the trucks.
Yeah,
Now, in the meantime, we sent people out on foot.
Yeah.
We knew that Heritage Manor, the nursing home just north of us,
Yeah, a couple blocks away. Yeah.
we knew that they had really bad devastation. We sent 2 guys, a paramedic, an EMT, 2 trauma bags, and they carried some oxygen cylinders, and they went down there and they took care of the people in there for like 6 or 8 hours until we could get trucks in to start evacuating people.
Yeah.
We sent people out on foot, but one of the issues we had, and you kind of at times you get that tunnel vision.
Yeah.
We were so consumed with getting the doors off so we could get the trucks out, we didn't pay attention to the fact that the streets were just littered.
Yeah. Where were you going to go?
Where were we going to go
Yeah,
when
you
we
couldn't
got
drive
out?
there. Yeah.
So, but while we were doing that, we got pretty just blessed, honestly. A couple guys pull up and some very expensive tractors, and they're like, "Hey, Chief, what can we do to help?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Push me a path.
Yeah. Start.
I've got to get down this street."
Yeah.
And they said, "We're on it."
That's
So
awesome.
they all night that they went up and down city streets pushing debris out so we could get fire trucks and ambulances out to people.
Yeah.
And these were just citizens
Yeah.
that from
Just
south
good old
into the
boys
county.
that wanted to help. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and just couldn't be more thankful for what they did that night, because we couldn't have gotten to the people that we did.
Yeah.
So all that's going on. We've got people at the candle factory. We've got calls. We've got people trapped. We've got fires. We've got medical calls. Station 1 is basically non-functioning. Now we had a generator, so in that entire area, we're the only thing with light. So, thank goodness it was operational.
Yeah.
So people started walking towards us. So we had people coming in barefooted, bleeding, scared,
Yeah.
just in their pajamas. I mean, it was almost like a scene from The Walking Dead or
Yeah.
something. Just people just started walking towards the light.
Yeah.
And so immediately we just emptied out the medical supplies that we kept in the station, brought them all out, and we start treating people. We bring chairs from City Hall and other buildings, and we've got people setting.
So you just set up a trauma center.
Yeah, we're
like-
basically just doing triage right
Yeah.
there. And so at this point, I hadn't been more than 50 feet in any direction away from the fire station. So I get my phone out and I call Joey Henderson, Mayfield Schools. I said, "Hey, I need school buses. I need people transported. If you can, I need you to open up Mayfield High School to be a shelter.
Yeah.
But I also need people transported to the hospital." And he said, "Jeremy, I don't have any school buses." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Every single bus in my fleet is destroyed. It hit the garage.
Yep.
I can't help you."
Yeah.
And I said, "Oh."
Yeah, because it's that bus garage set between the candle factory and the city
Yeah.
of Mayfield right there. So it
And
was
so
right in the
just
path.
not understanding the full scope of what just hit us.
Yeah, how bad this was.
So I hang up the phone. I call Matt Matting,
yeah,
and he says, "I'll have you 2 buses there. We'll run all night. We'll take care of you."
Yeah.
So they send me buses, and so they pull up on Broadway between City Hall and CVS, and they're just shuttling people for us all night long. At one point, the hospital sent, I believe it was Dr. DeBrose and a couple of nurse practitioners. We were actually treating patients inside the fire station before we, sent them off to the hospital.
See, I had no idea any of this was going on. That's
Oh
crazy.
yeah, and so while all that's going on, we had people coming up with their pets and just looking for a place to get out of the weather, because we kept having different lines would come through,
Yeah, and it'd be raining. a
and
couple
it
times,
would rain, and then progressively the temperature dropped as the front passed through.
Yeah.
So we're sitting there. We've probably got 60, 80, 100 people in there. The sheriff is in there Chief Kent from the police department. I'm in there. The mayor, Jesse Perry, Richard Heath, several city council members, county commissioners. So that was kind of our EOC. And so we have an emergency operations plan for the city and county, and we have plans to set up an EOC. But everything on the list was destroyed.
Oh no!
I mean, every city and county building, with the exception of my 2 substations and the county road department.
Oh, so you're saying every building that you would have set it up
every
in
building
was
that we
destroyed?
would have used was gone.
Yeah, I bet there wasn't a contingency plan for that, was there?
No. I mean, in all the training you do, you never train to be one of the victims.
Yeah.
Right. So, so we're up there working in all this chaos and just doing the best we can, and we're getting radio reports in and just calls coming nonstop, and I don't know why I remember this, but like it's stressful. You know, I mean, it's high pressure, it's high, like emotions are running high.
Yeah.
2 pit bulls come into the station, and they attack a woman who's holding like a little dog.
Oh no!
And so everybody goes to scare these dogs away, and I'm like, well, this is like has to be the threshold to hell. Like, we just got hit by a tornado, and one of our victims just got attacked by 2 pit bulls in the fire station. She's sitting there barefooted in her pajamas. Like, how much worse can it get?
Yeah. Just went through one extreme trauma to think she's safe to go through another.
Yeah, and I was like, what else can happen tonight? You know, but you know, we survived the night, and I didn't really understand how bad everything was until the sun came up the next day.
Yeah.
We worked all night, and there was a little bit of a lull for just a few minutes. And as the sun was coming up, I was sitting there with the mayor, and I said, I got to go outside. I've got to see it.
Yeah.
And when I walked out, like, I didn't recognize my own city.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just sitting there thinking, how will anything ever be the same?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking about, like, what does tomorrow at work look like?
Mm-hmm.
What does next month look like? The buildings that were here and the jobs that were inside those buildings, like, that's what funded my salary.
Yeah.
And so what's going to happen? And just how do we get past this?
Yeah. So let me tell my side of the story from that night, and then we'll talk about rebuilding and how we get past. So me and my family, we're sitting down to watch. You get so many cry wolves when it comes to weather.
Yep.
You get jaded, you get numb to it, you know, and much like you probably are, we just thought, there may be some weather. I may have a couple limbs down in the morning. I'll have to clean up, whatever, you know. So me and my family, we're sitting down, we're watching How the Grinch Stole Christmas. And the only thing that kind of started to get us worrying about it a little bit was our phones started going off, like weather alerts. And then my wife gets a text. At the time, my wife was a deputy jailer at the jail. My wife gets a text that says something along the lines, "Are you okay?" And she's like, "I'm fine. Why?" The jail's gone, or something of that nature.
Right.
You know, the jail got hit or whatever. And she's like, "Ha ha, real funny." You know, it didn't even hardly. Maybe the wind blew a little bit, but as far as the path of the tornado, by the way the crow flies, we were only probably about 2 or 3 miles from it, but still, it wasn't more than a thunderstorm sounding from inside my house. You know.
Right.
Well, about the time she's getting these texts, my pastor calls me, and he said, "What are you doing right now?" I was like, "Nothing." You know, and he knows my military background, EMS background. He's the chaplain for the candle factory.
Gotcha.
And somebody maybe from there called, or we haven't even sat down and talked about the night, really. And he said, "I need somebody to go with me. Can you go?" And I'm a yes man, so I was like, I'm getting my boots on.
Yeah.
So I tell my wife, I'm like, She's like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm going to the candle factory. Evidently, this tornado destroyed the candle factory. There's people trapped. Pastor Stephen called me. We're going. So I'm putting on boots. I was smart enough to put on like durable jeans, and I think I threw on like a fleece Henley, which I'm glad I did later because you talked about the temperature going down. So I'm like, I'll meet you there. So I jump in my truck. Off I go. When I get there, I go around the bypass area and get in, like going toward the candle factory off kind of that parkway spot there. And once I get to that intersection where the railroad crossing is and the feed plant, that's as far as I can get in my truck. And I'm like, well, I know I got to get there. So I just whip off in the ditch and I just start walking up through there. While as I'm walking up through there, there's a few people there's vehicles, there's emergency responding vehicles trying to get through, but they can't because of the trees. So then there's just good old boys out there clearing a path. And I'm like, I know my pastor said he's going to the candle factory. I need to get there. So I just keep walking. And I remember getting to the John Deere dealership there. And I remember the thing that rocked me with how devastating it was. Because the trees, I mean, I've seen blown over trees. No big deal. But there was one of those probably $1 million combines, those humongous ones. And it was completely wheels up. It was completely upside down. Wheels up. And we're talking, 20 tons? Who knows how?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm like, can you imagine the force? And the building looks like it it fell like, if you know how dominoes fall, that's how the building fell. Just laid over. And that's what made it so hard. So anyways, I hook up with my pastor as I'm walking down the road. He's there. He's like, hey, come on this way. So I start following him. And when I walked up and I saw that combine and I saw that building, my first thought was, we ain't got time to pray. We got to get to work.
Yeah.
And that's what I told him. He had a torn bicep at the time, so he couldn't do a lot anyways. But I looked at him and I said, I got to go help. And he's like, go. So I just took off. And at the time, the only first responders that was there, because, like you said, couldn't get there because of the trees, there was 3 Mayfield PD officers. David Harrison, I served with him in the military, and he's standing on the top of the pile. And I just yell up, I'm like, where you need me? And he goes, you got your bag? You got a trauma bag? I'm like, nope. He said, just get in here and start digging people out. So I just climb up in the pile. And what saved a lot of those people is they all took shelter in one spot. If they'd have been spread out all over the building, a lot more would have died.
So I've got an aerial photo of that entire scene.
Yeah. It's a couple 100,000 square foot building or 100,000 square foot?
It's probably 100,000.
Yeah.
And in that, it shows where one line dug out through it. Mm-hmm. And so I was in Owensboro this past week doing a presentation on the tornado, and I showed them, I said, we knew where their emergency plan had them to where they were supposed to go take shelter. So this is why you see this very specific line cut through the debris, because that's where everybody was. And then of course we went on and talked about a lot of people ran. Yeah. And so we didn't know, it was like 2 days later before we knew that everybody was accounted for. Yeah. But go ahead.
Yeah. So we get there. A lot of the people had got themselves out. So that actually helped us, because then they started telling us, hey, they're all in this general area. We all took shelter in this general area. But what made it hard was how the building fell. You had to dig. You had to cut stuff away and dig, and it was a steel building. Yeah. And so we're in there. I'm listening for people screaming for help. As me and a couple of other guys, just good Samaritans. We're not talking first responders. They're there, but they're doing their own thing. And for whatever reason, it's just the way God made me. I'm like, all right, I'm taking charge of this group. You guys follow me. We're going to go do. Yep. So we start trying to dig people out. We don't have any tools. And at one point, they started hollering, "There's another tornado coming." I don't know where that came from.
That they yelled the same thing with us.
And so they're like, "You got to leave. You got to take shelter." I can hear people screaming, "Help me! Help us! We're here!" And I'm like, I can't leave these people. And they started, like, some of the first responders were getting mad at us, like, "No, you have to go take shelter." So there's a hatchery behind there. We go back there. We take shelter. I'm like, while we're here, we're going to do some good. So like I feel like God perfectly equipped me because I'd done the EMS training, but I'm also a maintenance man.
Right.
And so I immediately find somebody that works at hatchery. I said, "Where's your crib? Where's your supply crib or your cage where you keep your tools?" He's like, "What do you need?" I'm like, "I need sawzalls. I need grinders. I need anything that can cut metal to get people out." He's like, "All right." So he takes me back there. We find it. It's all real nice Milwaukee stuff. I grab sawzalls, grinders. I'm shoving extra saw blades in my pocket. He's like, "What else do you need?" I was like, "I need like headlamps. You got any of those?" He starts ripping headlamps off of hard hats and stuff and giving them to me. So me, a couple other guys, I'm like, screw it. I'm not hiding in here when there's people, you know. So we go back out. By that time, there's more people. And there was a couple other groups. I hook up with a guy that I knew was in the military with. We start working together, using the tools. I handed out some tools to some other groups, and we start getting to work. The very first guy we found was the correctional officer who passed away.
Right.
And it's kind of a hard story to tell, but with my wife working at the jail, I knew this guy.
Yeah.
You know, not intimately, but I knew him. And, you know, he's unconscious, not breathing. And he was a big guy, probably 300 plus pounds. Yeah. There was a man laying next to him, and the only reason that guy survived is because the weight of the building was on the correctional officer.
Yeah.
And I worked on him for probably 20. I don't. It felt like a long time. Mm-hmm. You lose track of time when you're doing that. Yeah. But I worked on him forever, and then we realized he's gone. We're not going to bring him back. So I remember saying a quick prayer over him, and I looked at, you know, the 4 or 5 guys that were there. And I said, "There's more people. You know, we can't focus on him. There's more people." And so I think we helped save another girl and another girl. It all kind of runs together. But then I remember we found a hole that had like a dozen people in it, and me and a couple of Mexican guys, we just started digging our way down through there. And for whatever reason, I ended up being one of the guys in the front. And I remember there was a black gentleman that was kind of behind me, and we find this hole of like 12 people, and we finally get to them, and we start pulling them out just one by one, and we get like, I remember a guy coming out, a female coming out, and then there's he actually looked Asian. It's funny how you remember some details and some details you don't, but he actually looked Asian, and he was trying to help me. Like I'd hand him a sawzall, and he'd cut some debris, and I'd get it out, and we were working together. And I remember a thing that I thought was funny was like, I'm just a civilian in there, you know, doing what I was trained to do. And I remember turning around, and there's just like first responders galore, but none of them asked me to move. They were just like, "What do you need? Here." You know, they like, I guess they saw like, he's got it under control. Just let him go to work.
You can tell when somebody knows what they're doing.
Yeah. And so, but there was a black guy behind me, and he kept hollering this name. And, you know, the very next person that they hand me out is a black lady, and she's dead, you know, and had been for a while. She was already starting to stiffen up, and that was the girl he was hollering the name for. And I remember he loses it, you know, and I had to physically grab him and say, "You have got to get it together."
Yeah.
Like, and then I remember telling some of the first responders, "You got to get this guy out of here."
Yeah.
You know, he's just losing. He's falling all over me. He's doing, you know, and his worst nightmare is probably coming true in this moment. You know, I don't know who this lady was to him, but so anyway, we work through, and we get all those people out, and I think, was it 9 that passed just in the candle factory?
I believe so.
I'm pretty sure I pulled 4 of the 9 out.
Yeah.
You know, it was tough, and you know, it was crazy. We were getting like car jacks out of people's cars to pick the building up off of them, you know, and
so
it was some craziness.
So switch that back to my side of town.
Yeah.
So while all that's going on, my assistant chief, he lives out north of town. Right after it hit, he called me and said, "Hey, boss, where do you need me?" And I said, "I need you to go to the candle factory."
Yeah.
I said, that's probably the biggest single incident of this disaster for us.
Right.
And I want you to be, I'm putting you in charge of that. But I mean, so military, I'm sure, chain of command, incident command.
Yeah, there's got to be an incident command.
So like, I'm up there, and I'm at 30,000 feet looking down, you know.
Yeah.
And then I have people that are down at 10,000 feet, and I was like, "You're my guy at the candle factory." So I want whatever you need equipment-wise, you relay that to me at the EOC. I put in the request. I will get you anything you need, but I need you out there to lead what's going on.
Yeah.
So he goes out there. He checks in with me a couple times, and I'll never forget this. One time, and this is probably 2 hours into it or so, because we had some mutual aid. Mercy had come down,
Yeah.
Paducah Fire, Murray, and he called and said, "Hey, boss, I need your input." And I said, "Well, what's going on?" He said, "Well, we've got a guy. He's trapped, and we can't get his leg free, and his his vitals are trending down. We're thinking we may have to do something drastic." And I said, "What do you mean something drastic?" And he said, "Well, Lourdes, their ER director, is here. He's part of Paducah's, I think, SWAT team, rapid response team."
Yeah.
And he said he can amputate the guy's leg to free him up
Yeah.
and get him out. And I said, "So why aren't we doing it?" He said, "He won't do it unless you give approval. You have to consent to it."
Yeah.
And I said, "I have to consent to it from across town.
Yeah. Can't see. Don't
I
know
can't
what's going
see.
on. Yeah.
I'm only going on what you're telling me, and you want me to consent to you."
And he's the doctor.
And he's the doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the other.
Yeah.
He's the doctor.
Yeah.
But you want me to give consent for him to amputate a guy's leg in a collapsed building,
Yeah.
so you can bring him out. He said, "Well, we're afraid he's going to die if we don't do the amputation.
Yeah.
He has all the equipment. He just needs your go ahead." And I said, "Again, do you realize what you're asking me to do here?"
Right.
And he said, "Hold on a second." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "We think we might have a plan. They're working on something. Can I call you back in 5 minutes?" And I said, "Yes, you will call me back in 5 minutes, and I'll tell you yes or no then. But in the next 5 minutes, you move heaven and earth to get this guy's leg free, so I don't have to tell you to."
Yeah.
And 5 minutes later, the phone rings, and he said, "We got to cut one more piece of metal. We've got him free. We finally found somebody small enough to burrow down in there next to him and cut to free his leg up."
Yeah.
Everybody was just too big to get in where they needed to, and so those are the things that, like, most people they don't think about, they don't realize, and obviously the situation's way worse for the fellow that's trapped.
Right.
But with everything going on in that scene that I just described in the downtown area, I get a phone call saying, "Hey, you have to consent to this doctor
You got to make this call.
cutting this guy's leg off under a collapsed building."
Yeah.
So there's just it's funny. It's not funny, but it's interesting to me to hear some other people's perspectives, because everybody kind of has their own version of what they saw and experienced that night. So yeah,
If I'm being honest, I could not have been more proud of our community, because for toward the end, a lot of the first responders were having people leave as more first responders showed up.
Yeah.
And at some point it does get to a point where you get too many people and
Absolutely.
you're just in the way and all that. And I completely understand. As being a first responder, I understand that. But in the beginning, before the first responders got there, it was just a bunch of civilians out there.
They just
helping.
showed up to help.
Just showed up to help and
Yeah.
got in there. And some of them knew what they were doing, and some of them didn't. Like one guy said, "I don't know what I can do, but I'm like, you be right by me and do what I tell you to do."
Yeah.
And he was like, "Yes, sir."
Yeah.
You just muscle memory kicks in and you just start to do, and that's who God made me to be. And I was like, all right. In the military, I was enlisted, so I'm good at leading small groups of people.
Yep.
I'm not that 30,000-foot view guy like you, but that small group of a team or platoon squad size people, yeah, I can do that. Let's
Right.
get in there and get to work. But I remember after we got that, I made no exactly the guy that you're talking about. Because after we got the hole I was in, so when I say hole too, you brought it up. The top of the building that you like got in there on, you're 12 foot or so off the floor.
Yeah.
Because the way the building collapsed. So we had to burrow down to get to the people who were on the floor.
Yeah.
And then getting them out was a pain in the butt too.
Right.
Like they just kept sending Stokes baskets in,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd throw them in the Stokes basket, and we'd basically an assembly line to get them out.
Pass 'em
and
up.
then they'd send me another Stokes basket down if they couldn't walk under their own power. Some of them, they were fine, but the building had been laying on them so long that their legs were numb,
Right.
and they couldn't stand up. So
Right.
then they couldn't get out. But we got that. It was probably 12 or 13 people in that little hole, and when we finally got to the last girl, she was dead too. I'm in the inside of the building, but there were people working from the outside to get to us. So actually, the last couple or 3 people, we pushed them out the outside. They finally got to us that I just helped facilitate, get them out the other side.
Gotcha.
But when we got done, I was like, all right. In my mind, I'm thinking, all right, let's go on to the next hole of people. So as I come out, some people are starting to say, we think we got them all. We think we got them all. There's like one, and then it's probably the one you're talking about. They're like, they can't get him out. Well, when I go to look over there, I mean, there's 20 people standing
Right.
around. I'm like, well, I'm of no more use. So I come out, and, it's a chore just to get out. So I come out, and I'm good. Somebody hands me water. I mean, there was people there who were just hey, you need water? I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, sure. But I didn't realize this till later, but I come out, and the first person I come up to, they come up and they grab me, and they're like, you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. I was a rescuer, not a rescuee. They're like, oh, okay. I walk, a couple 20, 30 feet. Somebody else grabs me. Are you okay? I'm like, I'm fine. I was just helping, I keep doing that. Finally, I get to my pastor, and he's been on the phone the whole time, coordinating, helping get supplies, get people. And he does the same thing. He's like, you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I'm like, what time is it? And he's like, it's like 4:30 in the morning. I'm like, I've been in there 5 hours?
Yeah.
He's like, well, I guess so, yeah. I was like, holy cow, I don't know about my family. So unbeknownst to me, because once I got there, we talked about the rain. It was raining off and on. I had my phone. These smartphones, they're not real good with rain. I just grabbed some saran wrap that I saw in the building, wrapped my phone up in it, and shoved it back in my pocket. I never pulled it out again until I come out.
Right.
Well, unbeknownst to me, my wife, who works at the jail, she's got to get those inmates out. So she calls my dad to come watch my boys, and then she's gone too. So then I'm immediately starting to call her. She's not answering. My phone's dying, all these things. So my pastor's like, what are you going to do? I'm like, I got to go find my wife. I got some voicemails and some texts from her that say, hey, I'm going to work, so I don't know nothing. I leave the candle factory, go around the parkway, come in Broadway from that side, from the Fancy Farm side.
Mm-hmm.
And just like you talked about, you walked out the next morning and didn't recognize your town. At some point, I'm coming down Broadway to a town I've lived in my whole life, and I have to stop and get out of my truck to see where I'm at.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't recognize any buildings or anything. I didn't know where I was. I mean, I knew what road I was, but I didn't know how far down because everything's destroyed to my left and to my right.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And then I just looked up and I could see the Hall Hotel. I was like, well, I know that's where I need to go.
Yeah.
So I just started going that way. And then like you talked about Good Samaritans with a tractor, Colt Haley, he's out there just clearing the road
Working.
with a tractor. I'm like,
Yeah, that's who showed up tonight.
Yeah.
It was Peanut and him.
yeah. And he
Yeah.
goes, man, you don't want to go that way. I'm like, I got to. My wife's that way. He's like, all right, stay in the middle of the road. He's like, because of debris and nails. So I get there, and I eventually find my wife, and she does the same thing. She grabs me. She's like, are you okay? I'm like, I'm fine. Why? Well, it's a candle factory, and I'm knees and elbow deep in this candle factory. Evidently, I had gotten some red wax, and so my whole face was covered in red. People thought I was bleeding.
Well, so when the next day when the governor came and we had to go meet him out there.
Yeah.
And that it was the next morning before I got to see the candle factory site. I go out there and I look at some of my guys, and they had what looks like chicken pox.
Yeah.
And immediately I'm thinking, what chemicals have they been exposed to?
Yeah, you're thinking chemical exposure.
Yeah, and I'm like, I'm what's going on here? But I ask him. He takes a rag and wipes his face, and it just smears. And so that perfume, the dyes,
Yeah.
it was, they were sweating it, and it was coming out of their pores.
Oh, dang.
And as it would come out of their pores, it would leave a little circle.
Yeah.
But I mean, like I said, it would just wipe off. But to look at them, you'd think every one of them had chicken pox or
Yeah.
some kind of a rash.
Evidently, I had it all over my face because
Yeah.
people thought I was bleeding or whatever.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, we had turnout gear that smelled like pumpkin spice and autumn shower, and I mean, it was every color under the rainbow.
Yeah.
You know, it was.
Yeah, that night was crazy, and like I said, some of it's crazy to me. Like you talked about the dogs. Remember, it's crazy how I remember some of the details so vividly, but then there's some things like I can kind of remember. I can't see any faces anymore, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. Like I remember, all right, I pulled out. The first person we saved was a male, and then there was a female and another female, but I can't see faces anymore. But then there's some details I remember so vividly, so it's crazy.
Yeah, a lot of it, especially the next day. Like I remember a lot about probably the first 2 to 3 hours, and then it gets a little blurry. In a lot of the daytime hours, the next day,
Yeah, all runs together.
it's kind of lost to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember getting to go home and see Kelly and the kids.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of it that's kind of fuzzy.
Yeah. That was when the emotion of it all hit me, is when I got home.
Yeah.
So the first thing I did, I got home, then we didn't have power. We had power when I left, but when we come back, I didn't have power. Luckily, I'm on city water, so I was able to take a shower. And the headlamp that I got from old boy at the hatchery still had power.
Yeah.
I wore it around my neck all night. I would like to know the brand. I probably already thrown it away, but that headlamp lasted me all night.
Really?
And I hung that on my shower head to take a shower when I
shower.
got back. And it was still bright. But I remember after coming out of the shower, then sitting on the bed with my wife, and that's when the emotion of it, caught up with me. She started asking me, like, what did you do? And I couldn't even hardly tell her, you know, because it all caught up to me.
Yeah, I mean, just some of the things that, I mean, there was a child that had passed away that you couldn't get to the hospital from City Hall, so they just had to put the kid in a room, and the coroner couldn't get to us and there's just all these people trapped, and hearing people yell and scream and cry, and like some of those things, I don't know if they'll ever.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll ever forget them.
Yeah. One of the things I remember vividly that sucked really bad was when I got to my wife. She was just a couple blocks away from the court square, and there was her and like 3 or 4 other deputy jailers. And when they found out I was at the candle factory, the first thing they said is, we had a deputy there with some inmates. And I had to tell them.
Yeah.
It probably wasn't my place, but I also didn't want to lie to them.
Didn't want to lie.
I had to tell them he
Yeah.
didn't make it. And they're like, how do you know? I'm like, because I was the one who worked on him. He was the first person I found. You know? And that was rough,
Yeah.
But, the thing that, one of the positives of that night was I've never been more proud of my community.
Yeah.
Just seeing people gather together, step up. I mean, it didn't matter who you were or where you came from.
Yeah. I mean, there was no rich or poor. Mm-hmm. There was no black, white,
Nope.
Hispanic. There was only people from our community helping people from our community.
People.
Yeah. It was just people.
Yeah, it was encouraging. And so now we're almost on the 3-year anniversary, and now we're going through rebuilding process.
Yeah.
We're already at 2 hours into this thing.
Okay.
So let's sum this up pretty quick of where we are now,
So from a rebuild standpoint, I think a lot of our challenge is directly related to the economy and inflation.
Yeah.
I know I can give very specific numbers just on the fire station, but if you're a business owner that owned a business downtown and your building, let's say, it was insured at 300,000, insurance writes you a check. You have to pay 50 to 60,000 to have the lot cleared, and then to rebuild it, it's going to be 480,000.
Yeah. What do you do?
What do you do?
Yeah.
Are you willing to go nearly $200,000 in debt again?
Yeah.
On this business, or do you wait to see if maybe the economic conditions cool a little bit? The first time we bid out my fire station, it came back at right at $600 a square foot. Now, this is a building that had polished concrete floors, nothing fancy.
Right.
Fire station, half of it's a garage.
Yeah.
It's an 8-bay garage, and then office area, living quarters up above it.
Right.
And it came back at $600 a square foot.
That's crazy.
And so I think that's been a major that's had a major impact on our recovery. A lot of people think, well, where's all the money? As far as this, from the city of Mayfield, we haven't received a lot of money. Politicians come in and
make big promises.
They make big promises.
Yep.
Then FEMA comes in and tries to figure out how not to keep the promises.
Right.
They claim they're here to help, but that's really not. They create so many layers of red tape and hoops that you have to jump through.
Yeah.
A lot of people just end up giving up.
Yeah.
And then from our standpoint, we have to spend the money, and then they reimburse us. So, we have to rebuild City Hall, police station, fire station, entire public works campus. We had vehicles. A lot of our vehicles were destroyed from our fleets. A lot of our heavy equipment from public works was damaged pretty bad. So, like my fire station was, I think insurance was a little less than $3 million. To rebuild it was going to be like $7 million or $6.5 million.
Golly.
And then we were, the state's been really good, and they said, well, let's rebuild for the future. So we broke ground this past Monday on a $10.5 million project to build a new fire station.
Yeah.
So. But that's money coming from the state, not from the federal government.
Yeah.
So, it's been difficult. My groundbreaking was 1,013 days after the tornado.
Yeah.
That's how long it's taken us as a city to have the means to do it.
Yeah.
And actually, we still don't have the money.
Yeah.
We're just hoping that they get it to us before the first payments due.
We're hoping they come through.
Yeah, but if you think about it, in that same amount of time, just right out here, Samaritan's Purse, they bought 70 acres.
Built 60 homes.
They built a subdivision.
Yeah.
They built streets.
Yeah.
They put in sewer. They put in water. They built a subdivision and then built 60 homes in it.
Yeah.
In the amount of time it took the city to break ground on a fire station.
Yeah. Just the red tape and the bureaucracy behind it.
It's the bureaucracy and the red tape, and I work for the government, but government's pretty inefficient. And
I think everybody would agree with that.
Yeah, there's so many. The guardrails are so steep on both sides of the road, to keep you from veering too far off.
Yeah.
That they just create layers that just slow down what needs to happen.
Progress.
And
yeah, I think I see our community. I think a lot of people understand, but we do see some people get frustrated.
Absolutely.
With the pace of rebuilding, and I understand it too.
No, you won't find anybody any more frustrated than me.
Yeah.
I can promise you that.
Yeah.
And it's not by anybody locally's doing that that it's been a slow
Yeah.
progress. I mean, I can tell you, it's been a couple years ago, and we were in a meeting, and FEMA, they were just saying, well, you would qualify for this, but if the tornado was an EF5 and not an EF4, you would have qualified to have this
Yeah.
funding, but you missed it by 4 miles an hour, and just every question we would ask, there was always an excuse why we didn't
Yeah.
qualify for something, and it was right at the same time when all the Ukrainian war was kind of fresh and in the news,
Yeah.
and at one point I just said, on all of our uniforms we have an American flag on the shoulder. I said, if I rip this flag off and sewed a Ukrainian flag on, you'd be parachuting pallets of money into Mayfield, Kentucky right now.
We could get $1 billion.
I mean, I think they were saying at the time that the U.S. was spending like $230 million a day over there, and like they're saying that they're not wanting to help fund rebuilding a fire station.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what is wrong with this conversation?
Yeah.
When we'll just blindly throw money to foreign countries half a world away, but the actual taxpayers that fund your jobs, a small community in the continental U.S. that has been devastated, we just don't qualify.
We get the scraps.
Yeah.
We'll give you what's left over.
Yeah, and it's so frustrating, and I completely understand the frustration that an outsider looking in would have, but it's government.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Yeah, because, if you look at in the same amount of time, we talked about the Hope Initiative, not the Hope Initiative, but Samaritan's Purse.
Hope Initiative.
Hope
same
Initiative
thing.
has done the same thing. They've built 1, 2, 3 little basically blocks or developments there. 48 homes, maybe looking at 54 by the time they're all said and done, somewhere in that 50 to 60 mark.
Yep.
Samaritan's Purse built 60, all in the same amount of time. That have we built any government buildings back? We've started on
so the Public Works building is almost done.
Yeah.
Now it's a steel building, and it's out by the John Deere dealership. It's out 45.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So it doesn't get a lot of attention.
Right.
But it's work has been going on it for the last probably a year or so.
Yeah.
And it's definitely going to be the first city building that's done.
Yeah.
But we still don't have a fire station. We don't have a city hall. We don't have a police department.
Yep.
We're still all in temporary buildings.
Yeah.
Now my temporary station out there on the bypass, you've probably driven by and seen it.
Yeah.
That was a FEMA project. That's a $3.5 million tent that you're looking at out there, but it qualified under the FEMA program.
I heard it had to be temporary, though.
It had to be temporary.
Yeah.
So we were at the health department in the back of that building, and we just really needed a place to house our trucks.
Yeah.
And the director at the health department, she was like, "Hey, I'll deed you guys an acre or a portion of ground, and if they'll let you, like, apply and build a steel building, a 60 by 80, or just a place to get your trucks in and out of the weather. You can stay here as long as you want."
Yeah.
But they wouldn't do that because that's a permanent structure. So that would have cost $350,000.
But it's okay to spend.
But we can't do that. But we'll do the $3.5 million.
And that's got
tent.
government written all over it.
It does.
It makes no sense whatsoever.
It does.
It's fiscally unresponsible. And it would drive me bonkers to be in your position and have to make that decision. I would have to look at some bureaucrat and say, what sense does this make?
I did. I mean, we asked that question. We're like, why? We have a simpler, more cost-effective. Well, that's a permanent structure, and FEMA doesn't fund permanent structures. We're like, okay.
I can make it unpermanent. I can go take that building right back down.
But see, that temporary building has a 50-year warranty on it.
Oh, yeah. So it could.
When
y'all's fire station's done, it can be used for something else.
But somebody got in on a contract and got it labeled as a temporary, and so those are put up at military installations.
Yeah. Oh, as soon as I saw it going up,
You recognized
I was
it?
like, I've seen several of those before.
Yeah. So it's a it's been a learning experience. We'll just say that. And it's been a challenge, and it's been really hard to maintain an optimistic attitude at times. But again, that's when faith, family, friends, and fitness, like those are the things that have, and coffee.
Yeah. Coffee.
And those are the things that have kind of kept me sane through all this.
Yeah.
There are times when I've been sitting at my desk and like, I got to go to the gym.
Yeah.
I've got to go pick up something heavy a bunch of times or I'm gonna have a come apart sitting here, And then the same thing is like, I've got to go sit in my truck away from people, and I've got to talk to God. Like I've got to pray, and so I was telling our youth pastor one time, like I've learned kind of a little more of like praying without ceasing, because it's like you get in the vehicle and you're driving from one side of town to the other, and the entire time you're just talking to God about, just venting, asking, all the things.
Yeah.
And it's like every time I get a chance, I'm going to talk to God a little bit, and so it got really hard at times to sit down and carve out prayer time.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like if you added up all the 30 or 40 times a day that I prayed as I'm sitting behind the steering wheel.
You've had to yell at God even.
Yeah, well,
sometimes.
just begging, asking for some patience, or
I tell people all the time, talking about prayer and talking
Yeah.
to God and stuff, and I've had people come to me and be like, I'm just frustrated with this and that, and I just want to yell at God or be angry at God. I'm like, go ahead, He can handle it, and you'd be surprised at how you'll feel better. And usually what it is it's us bending our will to His.
Absolutely.
Through prayer. That's what prayer does. It's not that we're rubbing the lamp and the genie's doing whatever we say. Most of the time what it is that, we're bending our will to His. But He can take that.
Yeah.
He can take your frustration and your pleading and your whatever the things you're going through. So I can imagine in these past almost 3 years you've had to do a lot of that. I don't, in this instance, I don't envy your position, none whatsoever.
Well, and I'm not in it by myself, but it's been tough.
Mm-hmm.
It's been tough.
I will say though, we're starting to see some progress now.
Yeah.
In the city, and a lot of things in the first year or so are cleanup, and then I almost feel like we saw a lot of cleanup early on, people just getting in there and getting it looking presentable, and then you got a bunch of just concrete foundations, a bunch of vacant lots, and then there was a lull there where it seemed like nothing is getting done. That's when people start asking the questions of, well, where's the money, or what's taking so long, or whatever. And even some people, on social media, everybody's got a voice. Some of them are worried about this thing, this business, or where this was, and like you said, it's like that was private. It was a private business, and this person has chosen not to rebuild. What do you want us to do about it?
Right.
It's their land. They can do what they want with it.
Yeah, as far you can only, like, you can create incentives, which we did.
Yeah,
you can assist people. A lot of people don't realize, but there were people that had applications to fill out to get assistance from FEMA.
Mm-hmm.
The application was like 47 pages long.
Holy cow!
Now, so my code enforcement guys, they work under me at the fire department. We weren't writing citations for tall grass during this time.
Yeah.
But some of the things they did do, for the majority of those people, we filled out 45 of the 47 pages of their application.
That's awesome. And
they only had to do, like, provide their insurance and sign pages 46 and 47.
Yeah.
Like we found new roles for some of our people.
Yeah.
And every one of them were assistance roles. Like, what can we do? Because, in the end, if you help somebody get their their house demoed and a new house built. You're helping them, but you're also helping the neighborhood,
Right.
and you're helping the community.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, a lot of those things weren't talked about. You know, everybody's, well, what's the city doing? What's the city doing? Well, honestly, we're applying for assistance just like everybody else is.
Yeah.
We're jumping through the hoops, and we're begging and borrowing and having other cities lend us equipment and working out of health departments and Atmos Energy and the city clerk's office is not in City Hall. It's in a strip mall now. And so it's that part of it. And there's some people I think that are just never going to be satisfied. Some people just aren't going to like government.
Right.
And I think it's good to have a healthy distrust of government.
Yeah, I agree.
I do.
Yeah.
But I think it's kind of walk a mile in another man's shoes. It hadn't been easy.
Yeah.
And so
one of the things that typically happens in disasters like this, and we were fortunate that our pastor that's with us now, he just came to us in like 2019, and then the tornado hit in 2021. But he came from Houston and went through Hurricane Harvey, I think it was,
right,
the big one they had. So he had experience in dealing with natural disasters and the after effect. So he was already preparing us. He was like, hey, in the beginning, we're going to get a lot of media. We're going to get a lot of support, and I say that with quotes if you're not watching. We're going to get a lot of media. We're going to get a lot of support. We're going to get a lot of eyes. We're going to get a lot of talk about how everybody's going to help us. And then in about 3 weeks, all those people are going to leave, and we're going to be left to fend for ourselves.
Yep.
And we were like, well, yeah, sure. We'll see. And we had the Today Show came at our church. We set our church up as like a supply hub, and we were giving out Mercy Chefs came and set up. They were making meals. Today Show came and gave a check. Walmart come and we just had all kinds of stuff. And I was like, this is great. This is never going to end. They're going to take care of us. And before we know it, in the blink of an eye, our town's going to be back to normal. Nope. He was almost to the day correct. About 3 weeks. And the hoopla is gone, or maybe another natural disasters hit somewhere else in the country, and we're old news.
Yep, they move on.
And they move on to the next one.
So, kind of along those same lines, I don't love public speaking. I definitely don't love being in front of a camera. That's not where I'm comfortable. And one day, I was driving down 8th Street, and I saw Wes Fowler standing out in front of the church. And I stopped, went out, asked him how he was doing, gave him a hug, and he said, "What are you up to?" And I said, "Mayor called, and we got. I don't want to, but I've got CNN's down there wanting us to do an interview, and I guess I'm going to have to do that." And he said, "Yes, you're going to go do that." And I just kind of looked at him funny. He said, "We have to tell the story of Mayfield to as many people as possible.
Yeah.
Because if we're going to get the assistance our citizens need, the world has to know.
Yeah.
And the world only knows if we stand in front of these cameras talking to anchors and networks that we don't like, or whoever will hear.
Yeah.
If they ask you to sit in front of a camera and give an interview, you do it and do the best you can, and just try to represent your community and tell our story of the citizens that need assistance, and we'll see money flow in."
Yeah.
And so that checked me up a little bit.
Yeah, I bet.
And because that was, they wanted to do all their interviews at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
So the night I came home, I'd worked two consecutive nights. Hadn't slept. Finally got to go home, hugged the kids, spent some time with them, laid down at like 11 o'clock, and the mayor had texted me. She was like, "Oh, CNN wants to interview us. They need you there at 4:45 a.m." for their morning show, and I was
Right.
like, haven't slept in 2 days.
Yeah, that's gonna be great.
Yeah, yeah. So
I'll be right there.
yeah, I'll get my 2.5 hours of sleep,
Yeah.
and I'll see you there.
I
Yeah.
remember our pastor did several interviews, and along the same lines of he was just to get the word out.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And he was always trying to, even in disaster, he's always trying to get the gospel out there
Right.
every chance he got. And a lot of times they edited it out, but
Right.
he was going to try anyways.
gonna try.
I admired him so much about doing that. If there was a camera in front of him, he's like, hey, God's given me this opportunity. I'm gonna support our community, ask for help. I'm gonna talk about Jesus.
Proclaim Jesus.
Yep,
That's right.
And he did every time. I was like, you go, man. That's what it's all about. Man, we had some good talks, 2.5 hours. But I think it was good stuff. I'm hoping a lot of people in our community will listen, and they'll get to at least hear about walking a mile in your shoes, and kind of know hey, this is what we've been working.
Yeah.
Don't think we hadn't been working, but while doing that, we're still walking out our faith and loving on our family and friends and
Trying as hard as I can.
trying as hard as you can.
Yeah.
And if I'm being honest, Jeremy, you are a pillar of our community. I appreciate what you do. You probably don't get enough money for sure. You probably don't get enough respect or adoration for what you do. But I appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate it, and I like it. It's hard. That's not how I see me.
Yeah.
This is the job that the Lord blessed me with.
Yeah.
And these are the circumstances that I've been handed.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to try to do all I can with being fueled by the Holy Spirit,
Caffeine and the Holy Spirit. Man,
caffeine
that's
and
what
the
we're
Holy
running on.
Spirit. Yeah. And that's I appreciate the kind words and yeah, it's just it's been hurtful at times because you when you hear people kind of throw derogatory comments towards the city,
Mm-hmm.
like I work for the city,
Yeah.
or your wife comes home and they're like, well, they're talking at the city about, or they've been talking at work about how somebody at the city stole money.
Yeah.
I'm like, if you only knew how hard,
Yeah.
it's near impossible to steal money
Right.
from the city. I mean, I wouldn't even know how.
Yeah.
And sometimes you think the entire city's behind, not they're against you.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you feel the support. It's just it's a back and forth type thing. But prayer. Just keep praying for our community, and that's everybody listening.
Mm-hmm.
Pray for our community. Pray for the leaders in our community, the elected officials, and all the people that are working hard. Pray for the pastors. I mean, everything has changed for everybody.
Yeah.
And that's for our students at school.
Yeah.
I still have teachers tell me that students they cry and want to get in the closet when it's storming.
Yeah.
Like everybody has been impacted by
Mm-hmm.
this. So it's we still got a lot of recovery to do. I'm not ignorant to that, and I know the recovery has been slow, not near as fast as I'd like for it to be.
Yeah.
But we're playing the hand that we've been dealt, and like I said, that's just trying to stay focused on what I can control, and keep my faith in Christ.
Lean on the Lord for the
Lean
rest.
on the Lord for the rest.
And that's what us as men, that's what we need to do.
Absolutely.
We need to step in the role that He's called us to be. We need to do all that we can do. We need to lean on the Lord. Well, we need to lean on His strength to do what He's called us to do. But then what's beyond us, we give over to Him.
I firmly believe that godly men can lead this country back in the right direction. But we need godly men to stand up and be godly men everywhere.
Agreed.
Everywhere.
Yeah. And we talked before we really started the show. Me and you were talking. We are starting to see I'm starting to see some more men stepping up.
Mm-hmm.
You said you started to see, and you just read that article on Fox about how we're starting to see more young men enter the church. We're coming out of a phase where really women were having to step up and take on leadership in the church because the men weren't doing it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of motivation behind me starting this show.
Yeah.
Just like, come on, dude. I want to look through the camera to whoever's watching this and say, come on, man, let's go. Let's step up.
I'm going to try to say this, but it's a quote I have on my dry erase board, and it's strong men create easy times.
Mm-hmm.
Easy times create weak men.
Mm-hmm.
Weak men create difficult times. Difficult times create strong men.
That's right. And it's a cycle.
Mm-hmm. And you can say the same thing about like revival in the church.
Yep.
When we get away from leaning on the Lord, things go the wrong direction,
mm-hmm.
and then we come back to Him, and we right the ship.
Yep.
But that's life. That's men. That's at home. That's in the church.
Mm-hmm.
When things get easy and we think we can handle it ourselves, we stop leaning on the Lord, and then we're left to. We go off on the wrong path.
I would encourage anybody that wants to see this, just read the Old Testament and look at the people of Israel.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
and that same cycle that we're talking about, you can read that through the whole Old
time
Testament.
and time for
again.
40 years worth of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but if godly men step up, you can change that.
Absolutely. We see it every day.
Yep, we do. All right, it's a kind of tradition for guests to pray us out. You good with that?
Absolutely.
All right, let's do it.
Father God, we thank you for today. I thank you for Brad. I thank you for this podcast and the calling he has on his heart to bring men to you, to encourage men to follow you, to raise up godly men. I thank you for the time that we've had together. I pray, Father, that you would bless everyone who hears this. I pray, Father, that the words that we've said, the conversation we've had, might inspire others in some way. Father, just in all things, we give you the glory.
Yes, God.
We thank you for just providing this opportunity, for this avenue, for this the technology that's sitting here in this room that allows us to broadcast this conversation all over the world. Pray, Father, that you'll be with our community as we recover from this tornado. Be with the people that were impacted personally. Help us, Father, as your people, to help our brothers and sisters who are in need. Help us to seek out opportunities to serve others, and help us, Father, to serve each of them with a servant's heart and doing it all to your glory, Father.
Yes.
Forgive us, Father, of our many sins. Go with us, be with us, protect us, give us strength. And again, Father, all praise and honor to you. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. All right. Thanks, man, so much for coming on the show.
Hey, it's been an honor.
Yeah.
Appreciate you having me.
Until next time, stay ready.